Madam Deputy Speaker.
Let us pray. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodigheid wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela ilizwe lethu nabantu balo, omasile ukulunga kipondo letu. Nkosi sikelele I Afrika, tlina bantwano bayo, kokela inkokeli zayo, yenike ukolo I Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. You may be seated. Good afternoon, honourable members, our guests in the gallery and press, and all our members that are on our hybrid session. If the table staff could just monitor the screens while my computer has just been sorted out. I have to announce that owing to the resignation of Mr. A.T. Fritz and Ms. D.A. Debbie Schaefer, 2 vacancies occurred in the representation of the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. These vacancies have since been filled by the nomination of Ms. C. Murray and Mr. C. Fry with effect from 3rd of August 2022. Ms. Murray and Mr. Fry were sworn in by myself, the Deputy Speaker, on the 3rd of August 2022, and from now on I will refer to them as Honourable Murray and Honourable Fry. A very warm welcome to this esteemed House. Thank you. Board members, before we proceed, I'd just like to touch on a few of the logistics for the record. Remember, it's your responsibility to ensure that if you are participating virtually and not from the chamber, that you have good quality connectivity, and both in terms of audio and video, and that there are no disturbances, and that your system is functioning well. I do note that you would have received from the WCPP a good system and set of audio microphones, so I trust that that will help to ensure good connectivity. Honourable members are reminded that no interjections are permitted during these hybrid sittings, and in this regard I draw the attention of the honourable members to Rule 40 of our standing rules. I now recognise the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I move that the subject for discussion as printed on the order paper take precedence for this afternoon's sitting. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chief Whip. Are there any objections to the motion? No objections? Agreed to. We will now deal with the subject for discussion in the name of Honourable P.J. Murray, as printed on the order paper. I recognise the Honourable Peter Murray.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable members, what I'm about to deliver is not a political speech. It will be reaching out to the intellectual capacity of members in this House. It's a plea for political realism. I ask for open minds, pioneering spirits, and a break with conformity and outdated concepts like rule by a majority. For 28 years, South Africa has flirted with a hybrid federal system. 80% of all powers in the hands of national central government and only 10% divided between the provinces and another 10% local government. Since '94, the urgent need of provinces has been ignored, budgets slashed at will, unemployment allowed to rise to 70%, and corruption continued unchecked and unpunished throughout South Africa. My plea, therefore, is for the application of a system of subsidiarity, which is well stated in our Constitution. The devolving of powers to the Western Cape instead of mere delegation of certain powers. It's the essence of good governance. Subsidiarity is a system that works all over the world. It's the passing down of powers and authority to other spheres of government who has the capacity to handle and execute it more efficiently and effectively. I'll give you an example. In a multicultural society, it is foolish not to leave decisions to the people who live in that environment and who interpret the effects of policies on that society. Laws on education, for argument's sake, can never be the prerogative of a single class or ethnic group in a cosmopolitan society like we find in the Western Cape. The importance and validity of the Afrikaans language and Christian education per se has not been realized, and this has resulted in a perception that colored and white people are ganging up against English. It is not so. We plead for the recognition on an equal basis of Afrikaans as a national language. Speaker, we are living in fear in this country, especially Western Cape, because of rampant crime. We live in fear of rapists and murderers who poke their noses at an ill-trained, poorly equipped, understaffed police force. There's a critical shortage of skilled nurses at our hospitals, and hundreds of squatter camps paint an ominous picture of a failed state knocking at our door. We are in deep trouble. Let's face reality. National government policies with regard to job creation, border control, orderly land reform, education, crime, health matters, police deployment, public transport and housing has failed dismally. K-Day deployment has further aggravated matters. Appointing the best among us to critical positions in the public service is vitally important if we are to embark
Your time is up.
on a rescue mission.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Murray. I now recognize Honourable Minister Allen. My apologies, Honourable Allen.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. It is now today officially 100 days since my appointment as the Provincial Minister of Police Oversight and Community Safety. And I'm delighted that the ANC is very happy for me, because within this particular first 100 days, we have been deliberate in ensuring that we build our capacity in the department, but also ensuring that we conduct oversight visits to the South African Police Service and patrol with neighborhood watches, that we engage CPFs. I've met regularly with the Provincial Commissioner, and in my office, there's a particular quote.
Order.
And in my office, there's a quote that says, "We are in the business of policing and safety and not politics." And that quote I got directly from, and that particular quote I got directly from the police commissioner, because we never want to play politics. Politics literally means poly means many. Ticks means blood-sucking creatures. And from the arms deal to the Zondo Commission to state capture, we've seen that the latter part has infiltrated the political arena. So this is not about politics. This is about the daughter of member Ayanda Barnes. We are talking about the daughter of Ayanda Barnes that needs to grow up here in this beautiful province, that needs to be safeguarded. So thank you, Member Marais. And this is definitely not, and I may or I may not be a godfather as well. But also, Deputy Speaker, it was on the 20th of July this year when I published an opinion piece in the Daily Maverick with the headline, "Devolving SAPs to provinces is the only sane solution." This is also my topic for today with regard to the discussion, because most of us know that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Unfortunately, the management of the South African Police Service, sitting up in Pretoria, 1,500 kilometers away from where we are, have yet to catch on. For years, they have maintained the same outdated, unresponsive, unscientific policing practices. Meanwhile, the world has moved on, and so have our criminals, leaving the SAPs behind. For our part, it would be insane to allow this to continue. The only manner we'll see an impactful South African Police Service is if changes are made, and these should be drastic and sweeping. Like tattoos, the National Minister of Police sees devolution as a criminal act. In fact, it is this level of change that is required to start producing the different results we need from our hamstrung and mismanaged crime-fighting resources. The Western Cape government believes that there's a firm basis for devolution of policing to provinces, particularly where we can show that we can do it better, and we've consistently done that. In technical terms, reliance could be placed on the provisions of the Constitution, read together with Section 206 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, a constitution that people died for. And criminals have been able to organize that. That's why we have organized crime. And we've seen to break that, it should be devolved. Because we also know, Deputy Speaker, that in layman's terms, it is fully within the scope of the Constitution for the National Minister to hand these powers, knowing, and I'm sure that he does, that it would be better run here in the province. Because, let me enlighten the House again, Section 206.4 of the Constitution also makes express provision for the assignment of policing functions to the provincial executive through national legislation and or national policing policy, in terms of which provinces could be enabled to exercise policing powers beyond mere monitoring and oversight, which has to date been the norm. Because despite the National Minister's firm stance against devolution, we in the Western Cape government have not stood by. Knowing the painful cost of crime for our communities, we have already begun to invest in resources to offset national government's failure in this particular sphere. We have launched the LEAP offices despite policing falling outside of our mandate. Because when national government fails to step in, we ultimately step up. Because the National Minister would do well to stop clutching at power and instead take a leaf out of the Western Cape government's book by simply doing what is best to address safety for the sake of member Ayanda Barnes's daughter, because a police service under the Western Cape government would undergo several interventions.
Order.
We would immediately commence with the recruitment of more officers, with a focus on re-enlisting those who have left the service in good standing, particularly from an intelligence and a detective perspective. We can't have our detectives sit with a caseload of 250 dockets on average, because we all watch CSI and then a case is resolved within 60 minutes. Here we are living in an environment where our detectives are overburdened and overworked. Many of them require urgent counseling and attention because it is so difficult. We would also conduct an immediate review of all stations and assets to put an infrastructure upgrade plan in place. I've already written to Minister Patricia de Lille in that regard as well. We would establish a regular maintenance plan for all resources so that SAPS can be equipped. We will also then further learn from other countries across the world which have embraced technologies and systems to aid crime fighting. We would further, in the interest of member Ayanda Barnes's daughter, we would shift the ranking of officers to be based on qualifications and experience, based on merit. We would also then reintroduce specialized units to address categories of criminal behavior. But even more so, we would invest in a world-class forensic unit lab. So, Deputy Speaker, 7 minutes is definitely not enough, because I feel deeply passionate about this. I feel deeply passionate about members in this house, residents from Mitchells Plain to Swellendam, all the way to the Cederberg area, knowing that the men and women on the ground in SAPS are also yearning for better management and for choices not to be made all the way in Pretoria. Their lives are at stake. I went to Klaver and there was one female in the community service center, one female, which breaks the SOP of SAPS itself, but there was literally no one else. That means that SAPS itself is in danger of being attacked. Various police stations within this first 100 days where I found and I heard firsthand criminals break into SAPS. They break into police stations. How brazen must one be to actually rob the very entity that should be serving and protecting us? Because unless the management of SAPS is devolved to our province, I'm afraid we'll only keep waiting and keep suffering more losses. This is ultimately insane.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I now recognize Honourable Mimbi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. And good afternoon to you, the Premier, as well as other honorable members in the House. I would like to make use of the opportunity to welcome the debate as proposed by Honorable Mare. Deputy Speaker, on an occasion such as this, and when participating in a debate of this nature, it is important that we recall our past. Too often, the ANC is accused of always referring to history. Too often, as the ANC, we are always condemned for remembering those of us who were on the wrong side of history. The state and the constitution we debate here today did not come cheap. The competencies and unity of the South African state did not fall out of the sky. The competencies and unity of South African state came through blood and it cost lives. Yet, we do not expect everyone, even in this house, to appreciate this historical fact. On the occasion of his election as the first president of a democratic South Africa, President Nelson Mandela said, and I would like to quote, "Perhaps it was history that ordained that it be here at the Cape of Good Hope that we should lay the foundation stone of our new nation. For it was here at this Cape over 3 centuries ago that there began the fateful convergence of the peoples of Africa, Europe, and Asia on these shores. When we look out across Table Bay, the horizon is dominated by Robben Island, whose infamy as a dungeon built to stifle the spirit of freedom is as old as colonialism in South Africa. For 3 centuries, that island was seen as a place to which outcasts can be banished. The name of those who were incarcerated on Robben Island is a roll call of resistance fighters and Democrats spanning over 3 centuries. If indeed this is a Cape of Good Hope, that hope owes much to the spirit of that legend of fighters and others of their caliber. I close quote. The Western Cape, a part of the former Cape Colony, has been and will always be an integral part of this Republic of South Africa. The Honorable Mare knows all too well that the Union of South Africa, formed by the British in 1910, but which excluded the majority of the people of this country, was formed by the Cape Colony, among others. Without the Western Cape, there simply is no South Africa. We must therefore desist the thinking where this debate today comes from. We know exactly why we are debating this topic today. It is simply not about competencies of land reform, the competencies of police, the competencies of health, and the competencies of education. This debate is simply not about subsidiarity, but speak to the very heart of our nation as a country. For more than 350 years, we fought for freedom and unity as a country. For more than 350 years, some, even sitting here today, sought to divide our country through segregation, separate development, tricameralism, and Bantustan. Today, they stand up in this house and ask us to debate federalism. Efficient and good governance does not depend on federalism. Governments the world over are efficient and practice good governance, even without federalism. Today, we must commit ourselves to the unitary state that South Africa is, because South Africa has got one constitution. Today, we must insist on the principle of cooperative governance and ensure that its spheres of government work with each other to ensure a better South Africa for all its people. This must especially apply to local government, which is at the coalface of service delivery. This House has deliberately refused to hold accountable those local governments under its watch, but while endowing them with funds. The declaration in 1955 of the Freedom Charter that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, it's still as relevant as it is today. Yet, we must also acknowledge that the call for separatism of the Western Cape, especially as this motion suggests by having an open-ended approach to the national and provincial constitution, is based on it, if not solely on race. Racist opportunists call for the separation and the treating differently of the Western Cape simply because the racial demographic is different than it is in any other province. The Honorable Mare and all those who push for separatism must know that the independence of the Western Cape will only mean subjugation of one race by another. When the apartheid regime tried to reform apartheid by introducing the tricameral system, it was the UDF which stood up and shouted, "Apartheid divides, UDF unites." In his memoir, Politics in My Blood, the constitutional expert, Professor Kader Asmal, writes when explaining the writing of our constitution, and I quote, "Our constitution will recognize, accommodate, and even celebrate South African diversity and the multiculturalism of our country. The belief that a unitary state could accommodate South Africa's plurality will become increasingly important over the next 2 to 3 years when we will deny alternative constitutional model put forward by friends and foes alike that emphasize South Africa's heterogeneity." I close quote. Part of the heterogeneity of our country is that Cape Town has better governance system than Johannesburg. As the DA will have discovered, governing the cities of Johannesburg and Tshwane is not as easy as governing Cape Town. Yet, even more so, we must realize that our strength lies in our unity. it makes no sense whether politically or economically to break away. Today, the call by the Khoi and the San, as expressed through their language in our country's motto, rings loudly for all of us to hear. As diverse people, we must unite. We must not divide. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Vimbi. Before I continue, Honourable Vimbi, I see you logged in as Lulama guest, and that's not going to identify you. And I'm sure that we will eventually have to have rules that your name has to be evidence. So did you have a problem logging in?
Yes, Honorable Deputy Speaker, I had
Okay.
a problem with my password for
Okay.
my email, so that's why I'm using my phone.
No problem. That's fine. So you are confirmed as the person speaking. Thank you very much. I
Thank you
now
very much,
recognize
Honourable
Honourable Kleho.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I will also experience the same problem of logging in. I am a guest today. But
That's fine.
thanks, Deputy Speaker. From the onset, we would like to make it clear that as the economic freedom fighters, we do not support the proposition that powers relating to the police, education, land reform, and health to be devolved to the Western Cape. Supporting such a venture is tantamount to supporting this ever-increasing notion that the Western Cape should be declared a country on its own inside the Republic of South Africa. Such a notion is nothing but a pipe dream that will never be realized in this lifetime. In terms of the safety plan, the DA-led provincial government is already failing with their so-called safety plan with mass shootings on the rise in the province, continuing to be a den for illegal drug trade. So imagine now trusting such a government with policing powers when they cannot even turn its law enforcement into an effective force. The law enforcement remains useless and a waste of taxpayers' money even to this day. All they do is to focus on evictions when real crime is forever increasing in our townships. The education system. Under the DA-led government, the Western Cape Education Department has been in crisis for a very long time now. This is a government that struggled to place learners in schools. All the department does is to spend its time in the High Court trying to defend why it is failing to place learners in schools. So it will be a brainer to give such a government powers relating to education. In fact, this government needs assistance. It cannot be left on its own to implement service delivery. In terms of emerging black farmers, a white-led provincial government cannot be trusted with land reform. Every year, when we pose a clear question to the DA-led government on what are they doing to assist emerging black farmers with regards to the acquisition of land, when never get a clear answer. They always avoid answering this question, and instead they will tell you that they assist emerging black farmers with internship. How an internship going to assist anyone to acquire land for the purpose of farming, or except providing food gardens for our people? In terms of the health system in the province is also not so good under the government, where patients are found sleeping on the floor in township hospitals. When the provincial health minister is asked to intervene, she replies by saying that the situation will continue being like that, and then there is nothing that can be done by the department. This alone coming from the minister is an acknowledgement of failure. The elderly people are always found standing in long queues in clinics, even under the bad weather conditions, with zero implementation of the principle of Batupile from their health institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Kleho. Thank you very much. I now recognize the Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Agbare adjunct speaker, ek is baie dankbaar dat ons vandag hierdie debat kan voer. En ek is jammer dat van ons kollegas dink dat dit hier om afstigting gaan. Sentralisering van mag is gevaarlik en onwenslik. Wat ons benodig is die sinergie wat verkry kan word uit die uitruil van idees en beste praktyke tussen die onderskeie provinsies. Sentralisering is lomp, duur en oneffektief. In die afgelope 2 dekades wat die ANC regeer, het hulle hulself die reg toegeëien om al meer voorskriftelik te wees en wil hulle al meer mag sentraal uitoefen. Hiervan is daar talle voorbeelde. Ons tegniese en beroepsonderwyscolleges wat onder andere voor-matriekkursusse aanbied en wat eens onder ons provinsiale onderwysdepartemente geval het, is oorgedra aan die nasionale departement van hoër
Honorable
onderwys.
Speaker,
Hierdie sentralisering bring
Honorable
enorme
Speaker.
koste mee, sonder dat opleidingsdoelwitte enigstens
Speaker.
verbeter of behaal word.
Honorable Speaker.
Honourable van der Westhuizen, if you could just take your seat. Honourable Mvimbi, what's your point of order?
Yes, just I want to find out, I would like to have, I want to access the interpretation of, or the interpretation services if I'm using this device so that I can follow the,
Honourable Mvimbi, apologies. I think you need a second device. And if I can ask that the IT staff contact you and assist you while Honourable van der Westhuizen, I know you want to actually listen to Honourable van der Westhuizen's speech. If you have a second device and if the IT can help you, please. I don't want to keep the entire House waiting. Is that okay?
no, okay, then that's fine, Honorable Speaker. Honorable,
Thank
the
you very much.
Honorable can continue, it's fine.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mvimbi. I'll get assistance. You may proceed, Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Baie dankie. Elsenburg Landbou College het 'n lang tradisie van opleiding wat die unieke behoeftes van landbou in die Wes-Kaap aanspreek. Hierdie college se opleiding en fasiliteite is van uitmuntende gehalte, soveel so dat van die opleiding deur die Universiteit van Stellenbosch erken word. Raai wat? Omdat dit met landbouopleiding in die ANC-beheerde provinsie so beroerd gaan, omdat die diere van ander landboucolleges besig is om van die honger te sterf, wil die sentrale regering Elsenburg oorneem. Moontlik om daarom een suksesstorie te kan hê, sentralisering van mag is gevaarlik. Ons het meer kompetisie van idees tussen verskillende provinsies nodig. Kyk byvoorbeeld na grondhervorming waarna die vorige lid verwys het. In die Wes-Kaap het ons 'n model waar ervare landbouers deur aandeelskemas, grondeienaarskap en transformasie bevorder. 72% van hierdie projekte is deur 'n onafhanklike studie as suksesvol geklassifiseer. Hierteenoor is daar die sentrale regering se model. 'n Model waar ene meneer Ivan Kloete, 'n opkomende boer van Daling, op onwettige wyse van sy toegekende plaas afgesit sou word om plek te maak vir 'n MK-kader. Hierdie provinsie se model is een van private eienaarskap. Die sentrale regering se model is een van staatsbesit en 30 jaar huurkontrakte. Ek sê weer, ons het nie sentralisering nodig nie, maar 'n kompetisie van idees tussen verskillende provinsies. Adjunct Speaker, kollegas, kan u voorstel hoeveel beter die toekenning van viskwotas hanteer sou kon word as dit deur die Wes-Kaap hanteer is? Ek herinner u daaraan dat minister Barbara Krisi haar eie departement hof toegeneem het om die aanvanklike toekennings tersyde te laat stel. Met die tweede probeerslag is die proses weer eens so ondeursigtig, om dit sag te stel, dat die leier van die ANC in hierdie parlement vissers aanmoedig om nie die uitslag van sy eie ANC nasionale minister te aanvaar nie. Die agbare Dakmor het 'n veldtog begin teen sy nasionale minister en help vissers om appelle in te dien. Adjunct Speaker, deur u baie dankie aan die leier van die oppositie vir sy insig en sy erkenning dat viskwotas eerder op provinsiale vlak toegeken moet word as vanuit Pretoria. Ek sê weer, sentralisering van mag is gevaarlik. Ons het meer kompetisie van idees tussen verskillende provinsies nodig. Die sentrale regering se vermoë om enigiets te organiseer is uiters beperk. Dit het ek onlangs weer ervaar. Dit was my voorreg om 2 weke gelede 'n aantal plase te besoek saam met die nasionale parlement se komitees vir landbou, grondsake en landelike ontwikkeling, sowel as die departement van indiensneming en arbeid. Die reëlings vir hierdie besoeke was so swak dat enige twyfel oor die vermoë van die nasionale regering en sy departemente om enigiets te bestuur soos mis voor die son verdwyn het. Uitnodigings na die 3-daagse program is slegs 1 dag voordat die program begin het uitgestuur. Dag 1 se program op die Dorings het afgeskop met 'n openbare vergadering en sou afgesluit word met besoeke aan 2 plase om eerstens die lewensomstandighede van plaaswerkers en plaasbewoners in die omgewing te sien. Ernstige kritiek teen verskeie nasionale instellings, insluitend die Departement vir Arbeid en die Departement van Binnelandse Sake, is uitgespreek in 'n verskriklik oproerige vergadering. En die besoeke aan plase is op die laaste nippertjie afgelas. Dag 2, en Saterdag, het op 'n vals noot begin toe die Blou Ligbrigade in hul gevolg van ongeveer 30 voertuie aanvanklik die verkeerde plaas ingeval het. Dit blyk ons manne in blou het nog nooit van Google Maps gehoor nie. Op die tweede plaas het die verteenwoordiger van die eienaar gesê dat hy nooit ingelig is van die omvang en doel van die besoek nie. Die indiensnemingsrekords was, soos wat 'n mens van 'n Saterdag kan verwag, agter slot en grendel en die groep het onverrig ter sake die plaaswerf verlaat. Dag 3 se program het aangedui dat 2 plase tussen Vredendal en Loetsville besoek sou word. Weereens het swak organisasie ons gelei na 'n plaas wat weens swak kommunikasie nie voorbereid was op ons besoek nie. 'n Ander plaas as die een wat eintlik deur die Surplus People's Project vir besoek geïdentifiseer was, se bewoners het vergeefs vir 'n besoek van die nasionale parlement gewag. Die kosbare tyd en belastinggeld wat deur swak organisasie gemors is, breek 'n mens se hart. Dit sal soveel beter wees as die nasionale regering met provinsies sal gaan sit en verantwoordelikhede en rolle duidelik uitklaar en afwentel. Regeringsgesag behoort afgewentel te word tot op die laagste praktiese vlak om bevoegde provinsiale regerings te bemagtig om beter dienste aan ons mense te lewer. Dienste waarmee die ANC-regering tans hopeloos misluk. Sentralisering van mag is gevaarlik. Ons het meer kompetisie van idees tussen verskillende provinsies nodig. Baie dankie.
Baie dankie, agbare lid. I now recognize the Honourable August.
Deputy Speaker, in our 2019 manifesto, Good laid out a plan to fix South Africa by fixing towns and cities. The rapid change we are seeing in urbanization is due to the steady flow of people into cities and towns, and it is estimated that more than 80% of South Africans will occupy town and city spaces by 2050. We cannot do government as usual, as this unprecedented shift towards economic hubs and urban centers will further drive the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots. Speaker, Good support the call for metros to play an increasingly bigger role in providing services currently centralized in national government, as the societal makeup of South Africans differ from town to town and city to city. Therefore, a standardized approach will limit the urban patterns as the statistics are suggesting. We should be careful on how these calls for devolution are often opportunistic and used as political banter to feed an electorate hungry for change. In turn, Good says that formal housing delivery should be devolved to metros. It will stop the expansion of low-income housing on the city outskirts, as these fuels urban sprawl and recreate apartheid-era dormitory suburbs of poverty. Public transport should be integrated between buses and railways for one ticket system to make provision for the cost-effective transport that saves time, money, and reduces road congestion. We will build the infrastructure that is needed and will provide policy certainly to investments in the metro. It will also allow the metropolitan areas to generate their own power. Devolution can work, but it must serve as a solution to expedite services to poor people in town and city areas, and should not be made to be a power grab for fuel the egos of political parties who predominantly exist to serve the interest of a select few. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable August. I now recognise Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, although South Africa bears some elements of a federal system, such as the allocation of certain powers to provinces, it is nevertheless constitutionally and functionally a unitary state. South Africa, as a unitary state under the ANC rule, has proven to be a broken state. The ANC is playing politics with the lives of our people. Things are getting worse under the current ANC dispensation. Deputy Speaker, there are calls from groups within the Western Cape for the Western Cape to be an independent country. This has nothing to do with racism. This is everything to do with a desperate attempt.
Order.
to run away from the ANC as far as possible. People are sick and tired of ANC
Order.
politics, sick and tired of corruption, sick and tired of looting state enterprises, sick and tired of this green and yellow monster that is destroying this country since 1994. Now the answer is a strong federal system. Provinces should have exclusive powers when it
Order.
comes to policing,
Order, members.
education, health, transport, and much more. Metro Rail, which plays an integral part in transporting our workers to and from their places of employment, needs to be localized. Deputy Speaker, the provinces have first-hand knowledge of the conditions of the communities, and the communities deserve better services. The fact that our police services are under-resourced shows that the ANC government does not have a clue what's happening in the provinces. The ANC is clinging onto power at all costs. But this will change in 2024, where the ANC nationally will sit on the
Order.
opposition benches. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Christians. I now recognise Honourable Kaiser Philander.
Sick and tired, Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, I can't hear the Honourable member. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. In Schedule 4 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, it stipulates that health services are defined as concurrent competencies for both national and provincial spheres, as well as that of local government. These provisions are further elaborated in the National Health Act, where the National Department is primarily responsible for the development of policy and the province mandated to implement it. This means provinces are positioned as the agents responsible for running the majority of public healthcare facilities in our country. It is this framework which realizes a structured and uniform healthcare system. However, with the increasing pressures being experienced, this debate could not come at a better time, as it now where we need to expedite our efforts to devolution. Honourable Deputy Speaker, unfortunately, for as long as the ANC is in control of the national government, they will not be interested in what the Constitution or any piece of legislation prescribes.
Order, members. Order, members. You may proceed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Die waarheid maak seer. They are on a mission of destruction with the NHI as it aims to completely centralize healthcare. In the bill, the Minister of Health is given the power to designate certain central hospitals as national government competence. As such, the administration, management, budgeting, and governance of central hospitals will be a competence of the national government. Not only would this incapacitate public health care, but it would also undermine provincial powers as enshrined in the National Healthcare Act. Practically, we would see the equitable share of funds to provincial departments being directed towards financing the fund. We all know that provincial departments are already stretched. Thus, as a reduction in their equitable share will be disastrous and reckless towards health outcomes across South Africa. We see this in this year's budget too. While the equitable share and conditional grant contributions have increased, all of them are once again below the inflationary increases we have experienced over the past few years. This means the Western Cape will have to continue doing more with fewer resources. Despite the constraints the Western Cape finds itself in, we have a competent administration dedicated to being innovative. 114 million rand was reprioritized within the departmental baseline to fund projects linked to addressing surgery backlogs and many other more care and management capacities within our facilities. Moreover, a significant focus has been placed on infrastructure, as spending on existing infrastructure assets increased by 10.91%, with upgrades, additions, refurbishments, and rehabilitation spending having increased by 99.28% and 54.1% respectively. Beyond this, new infrastructure spending is 110.11% more in comparison to the 2021-2022 year. Honorable Deputy Speaker, this is how a department ensures quality healthcare for residents in the Western Cape and how our province is the benchmark for federalism. Despite our services being noticeably better, the ANC is of course going to argue the opposite. The hymn sheet regarding the Western Cape state of health sounds like this. Long queues, people lying on floors, people waiting too long for services, staff shortages, infrastructure challenges. And yes, Deputy Speaker, these do exist. But we need to be honest about why do this exist. Let's do a reflection today. During recent oversights, it was clear that there are many socio-economic factors placing strain on our healthcare system. Over time, the demographics of the communities in which facilities operate have required them to provide more specialized services. This has translated in them going beyond the initial designs and mandates in order to serve the community. While they are able to do so for the foreseeable future, in the long term, the designated funding would be insufficient for the projected demands. On top of that, the healthcare system is wrapped up in immense bureaucracy from the national government. Current legislation, such as those relating to staff employment, mental health care, and others, mean that they are systemic blocks to allowing the system to work more efficiently. But what the ANC refuses to realize is that this is an issue which affects all facilities across South Africa. The only difference is that in the Western Cape, we continue to provide public health care that works within the current system, with competent management and dedicated staff members who tirelessly care for patients. That is why it is crucial for South Africa to embrace federalism. The call to devolve healthcare is not something which is unique in South Africa. It is something that has already happened around the world. While members from the opposition will argue that decentralization would lead to a complete failure of health, then why is it that Nordic countries, often seen as the model of a welfare state, have all decentralized their healthcare systems and have coupled it with a fiscal federalism approach? Devolved health means the department can create policies that are more aligned with the community's needs to ensure that service delivery is done in the most effective and efficient way possible. It will mean having more money being sent to provinces so that our facilities would be even more empowered. It means that services can be streamlined and that patients no longer have to wait in long lines to get the assistance they need. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Brinkhays.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Speaker, am I audible?
You are. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. The Al-Jama rejects in totality this ridiculous argument by the French Front, instigated by the DA party, for national government to hand over powers of police, education, land reform, and health to the province. We are against the DA's plans to exit the Western Cape from the rest of South Africa. The oppressed people have fought hard and sacrificed their lives and livelihoods for a democratic, united South Africa. The DA is intent to bring back apartheid to South Africa by plans to exit the province so it can continue to oppress and to exploit the poor masses. I thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Minister, David Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was not in the House last week, but it's hard not to miss the fact that the Honourable Khalid Saher has taken the seat normally occupied by the Leader of the Opposition, who, when I last looked, was the Honourable Cameron Dugmore. Perhaps the Honourable Pat Lecker, when he speaks in a few moments, will tell us.
Order, members. Order, members.
In what is clearly a divided, demotivated, and defeated party.
Order members, remember we have members on the virtual screen that need to be able to hear the minister. Please let that not be a alarm.
It's a call of distress from the former
Minister?
leader of the opposition.
Minister, if you can just take your seat, honourable members, just give us a second. If that is a fire alarm or not, we may have to adjourn for a moment. If you can just hold on, please.
Panic in the ranks.
People in the house. Thank you very much. That was a false alarm with much relief. Honourable Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Honourable Regan Allen on his 100 days. And I'd also like to note that it was so good of Kasatu to join him in celebrating his this important milestone. They must surely have been marching to the National Assembly, but then got lost and ended up out here celebrating your 100 days. Deputy Speaker, if we step back, we lead the rest of the country in driving innovation to improve the quality of education of our learners and the education that they receive in the Western Cape. We have used the space available within our provincial mandate to implement innovations, including collaboration schools, the School Evaluation Authority, annual systemic testing, and of course, most recently, our intervention to reverse learning losses in the foundation phase. Our province is clearly seeking to move forward, but too often we find that national government and its fellow travelers hold us back. But I can assure the people of our province that we will not back down from trying out new interventions to support our learners and from creating new learning opportunities in the Western Cape. As members of this House are aware, we recently announced that our province will be taking decisive action over the third and fourth term to enable an increase in time allocation for mathematics and reading in the foundation phase. These are the grades that were most severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we must do everything we possibly can to ensure that our young students are not disadvantaged in later grades. The intervention will not increase the length of the school day, but it will ensure that our learners have more teaching time in these critical subjects, and we are pleased that this received the unanimous support of all parties in the House. Our department is uniquely placed to identify and tackle learning losses because this, of course, is the only province that performs annual systemic tests in languages and in mathematics. And of course, these internationally benchmarked tests can pinpoint the specific areas where learners are struggling. And it's on the basis of this that we can implement the kind of forward-thinking interventions that are needed to support our learners in the Western Cape. Deputy Speaker, as a province, we are also leading the way in developing new types of partnerships in our schools to allow public schools to access additional resources and explore new ways to improve schooling. Yesterday, I visited Apex High School in Eerste River, an award-winning school that is implementing unique teaching and learning programs to ensure that no learner is left behind. Many members will not be aware, but this is a collaboration school, which is a partnership allowing the school to implement programs such as reflective learning, which provides a personalized catch-up course to bridge learning gaps for individual learners. This kind of flexibility and support is unique to collaboration schools and is unique to the Western Cape. Without this model, hundreds of learners from our poorest communities would not have the opportunity to access quality education. The innovation by our province and schools stands, of course, in stark contrast to the direction taken by national government, which is currently engaged in an assault on provincial and school governing body powers through the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. And as I have mentioned earlier, given the way in which collaboration schools are delivering quality, no-fee education to hundreds of learners in need, it's surprising that SAT2 and Equal Education are joining forces to block the establishment of these schools. This unique model is delivering excellent results, but it is being opposed because it's new, because it is innovative, and because it works, creating hope for learners in poor communities. This is the sad reality we face. While we try to move forward, they try to hold us back. While we try to build up, they try to break us down. And while we seek to open up, they seek to shut us down. If national government and its fellow travelers believe that this will stop our government from delivering on its mandate, they are sorely mistaken. We will not rest in our efforts to achieve our vision of quality education for every learner in every classroom, in every school in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Mania. I now recognize Honourable Lecker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The ANC welcomes this debate because we must expose the inefficiencies, lack of service delivery, and transformation by this provincial government with the powers they already possessed. 20 years ago, a member of this House stood up in this House and said, and I quote, "I have an African dream, but there are people in this House who have an American European dream." Quoting Vicky Simpson's hit song, the member went on to say, and I quote again, "No more walls, no more walls, no more anger, my African dream, there's a new tomorrow," close quote. Deputy Speaker, that member who stood up 2 decades ago to speak unity and building a better South Africa was none other than Honorable Peter Maree. Today, the Honorable Maree wants to build walls and singing of a white Freedom Front Plus, not a white DP. He is dreaming of a white Freedom Front Plus, just like the one he used to know, where the colors are tokens and promises broken and councillors shunted to and fro. He is dreaming of a white Western Cape. Today, we can easily include the Freedom Front Plus as a party stuck in the past, which cannot find itself at peace in a new South Africa where majority rules. Today, the very people who want to defend the Constitution against amendments of land redistribution is calling for the Constitution to be amended for their racist purposes. Today, it is very difficult to find people, especially in this House, to admit that they supported apartheid. Yet it is through debates such as this that we find those who have taken off their mask to reveal their racist selves. Even today, as we see members of the DA, not only the Freedom Front Plus, who support this racist call to devolve powers, people who simply do not want to be governed by Africans, people who simply believe that Africans cannot run a country, racism to the core. This debate is not about efficiency or good governance. If it were Worcester Hospital, you would have long been replaced because health is a provincial competence. In 2014, when Tiens Botha closed Worcester Hospital, the DA-led Provincial Health Department, a competency full in the hands of the province, said that the replacing facility will be opened in 2019. 8 years later, a full 8 years, the facility is still in phase 1. DA infighting between Botha and his fellow members in the DA eventually led to Botha resigning. Who suffered at the end of the day? The poor who are reliant on the services provided by Worcester Hospital. Our appeals for support of Mitchell's Plain Hospital, Khayelitsha Hospital, and Ceres Hospital have fallen on deaf ears. Luckily, we have the Constitution of the Republic, which allows us to appeal to our colleagues in the National Parliament to intervene. These are but some of the disasters in our provincial health, a provincial competency. Please do not refer us to ANC-run provinces. ANC provinces are not asking for more competencies. ANC provinces are not calling for more powers. The MEC of Education, provincial competency, failed to appear before the standing committee meeting on Tuesday past. The topic of discussion was non-placement of learners and the difficult application system. In a multi-partisan approach, the ANC called for the presentation by the MEC and his department so that we can assist the department in this application process and prevent thousands of learners of not being placed annually. These thousands of unplaced learners and those struggling with the online application system comes from the ANC constituencies, the poorest of the poor. The MSc refused to make a presentation and be held accountable. Even worse still, the chairperson of the standing committee agreed with the MEC that he did not appear. The DA members of this legislature covering for DA members of the executive, and yet this motion calls on more powers of the legislature. Education is a provincial competency, and it is but one disaster which happens annually. The provincial constitution calls for the establishment of an environmental commissioner. To date, Reef Sands Nature Reserve, in the heart of a poor community, but hosting some of the rarest species of flora in the world, is being deproclaimed. Yet, this power given by the provincial constitution to the premier not being used. When we have a perfect education department and healthy health department, when the premier of the province is doing a sterling job at implementing the provincial constitution, then we can come and have this academic debate in this house on subsidiarity. The MEC for Community Safety stands up today and brags to the media that in his 100 days, he has done a sterling. Surely the Honorable Murray must ask, what gangster in this province fears the MEC? What drug dealer will take this comedian turned MEC?
Order, members.
What drug dealer will take this comedian turned MEC for Community Safety Nochals seriously? Yet members of this house want subs to be under the comedian. The motion calls for more provincial powers on land reform. The MEC for Agriculture is clear. He will not emphatically support emerging African colored farmers. When Casidra advertised funds from national government for these farmers during COVID-19, the MEC instructed the withdrawal of the ad calling for applications. The ANC does not only read about land reform, we live with the injustices of land distribution in this country. The ANC does not only read...
Order, members. Order, members.
The ANC does not only read about crime. Our communities where we live are ravaged with crime, drugs, and our women and children raped. The ANC does not only read about poor schools or poor health services. We live in these communities where our grannies must go and sit in a queue from 3 a.m. Our children are the ones that are not placed. Our children are the ones losing schools daily. Yet we see this disaster and we insist that our country is one that we want to be able to rely on national government to intervene when necessary. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable members, I know you're having conversations across the way, but I can't always hear the Honourable members speak. I now recognise Honourable Peter Murray.
Thank you so much. This was a very useful debate. Apart from some skewed interpretation of what devolution means, generally I think it was of a high quality, and I want to thank members on this side of the house. I want to remind
members.
Honourable Member Lekker.
Order, members, I can't hear.
I want to remind them that currently South Africa is run by an intellectually ill-equipped oligarchy. A small but powerful group of people is running this country, and they're drooling at the thought of replacing your president in December. That's how sure you are of 2024. We in the
Order.
Western Cape will be left as sitting ducks should the RET faction in the ANC emerge victorious. We need to extricate ourselves from central domination. Let me teach you what a famous writer wrote, Maxwell J. If leaders demonstrate competencies, genuine concerns for others, and admirable character, then the people will follow them. Now, I ask you, why do people stop following you? Is it not because you lack all these things?
Order,
Here in the
members.
Western Cape, we have such honorable members of the ANC sitting here. But you are being led by corrupt people
Order,
that
members.
sit in national government. You don't say what you believe, you say what you are taught by corrupt ministers. And if you deviate, you're out. I can say what I like, and I'll stay here.
Thank you.
That's democracy.
Thank you, honorable member. I now recognize the Honorable Minister Bradell. Your 2 minutes finished.
Thank you. Thank
Order,
you,
members.
Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker. This debate has covered a lot of ground, but allow me to bring us back to the essence of the matter before us today, the principle of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a general principle that says that government should take place as close to the people and to the citizens as possible. Subsidiarity protects lower levels of government against undue interference from a national government. Subsidiarity promotes the placing of functions and powers at the lower level of government where possible. The European Union is a good example where the principle of subsidiarity is strongly embedded. The central EU bodies only exercise powers when they cannot be exercised by individual member states. Internationally, the principle of subsidiarity is often recognized as important for the development of local government systems. Back at home in South Africa, our constitution also speaks to the principles of subsidiarity. In section 156.4, the role of local government is protected and it encourages national government to transfer functions to local government where possible. Speaker, we have heard arguments ranging from police, land reform, education and health that makes out a very strong case for transferring funded mandates in these but also other spheres of responsibilities from our national government to the Western Cape provincial government. Speaker, our situation is different from the European Union, where the EU is working to benefit its members. Our national ANC government is clinging to power for the sake of its own political survival. Let me rephrase, our national ANC government will throw its people under the bus if it is allowed them more time at the feeding trough. For us in the Western Cape, it is a fight for getting what is rightfully ours. Honourable Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Marais for this debate. He's quite right when he speaks to the budget of provinces, the shrinking budgets of provinces and local government because of the stealing and looting at the national level. We will not rectify that, Honourable Marais, before we look at a different financial model, because as long as the national corrupt ANC is in control of the money coffers of this country, they will keep the power there. I want to congratulate the Honourable Allen with his 100 days and thank you for your hard work. I've picked up on the CSI 60 minutes that it takes to solve a case. I think here it takes us 10 minutes to lose the dockets. But in any case, it's something that we need to look at. We definitely need to look at how can we protect our communities. And I know that you and your department will do your oversight role as as good as you can. To the Honourable Mavimbi, you know, the history is painful and nobody wants to deny our history. But I want to ask you, what have the ANC done over the last 28 years, except of stealing, looting, and running this country
Honourable
into the
Minister,
dumps? Look at the Zondo
if you
Commission.
can just take your seat, there is a point of order. Honourable Said, what's your point?
Honourable Chair, on a point of order, can the Honourable Bradell speak through you, please? Thank you.
Honourable Bradell, please speak.
Deputy Speaker, Honourable Deputy Speaker, they can just look at the Zondo Commission. That's a commission which the ANC president called into life and spent over R1 billion to look at the looting of the ANC. They spent more than R1 billion, money that could have been used to support the poorest of the poor. That is what they've done. This is not a race debate. This is ANC failure debate, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The only thing that I can agree with the Honourable Mavimbi is that diversity and unity is our strength. And it's sad that the ANC not have realized that over the years and build us as one nation with one future. Honourable Deputy Speaker, I want to congratulate the ACDP Honourable Christians because, yes, it's a broken state. ANC play politics with our people's lives and they run from the ANC. They run from the green and yellow monster. You're quite right. You're 100% correct. And the polls will show this. And then I just want to touch also on the Standing Committee of Education. They didn't refuse to appear before the Standing Commission. They just asked for postponement. They will come. They will enjoy it to come because we've got nothing to hide. We've got a good story to tell, and we will teach the ANC how you invest in our children so that the whole of the Eastern Cape don't end up in the Western Cape. Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Lekker has touched on a lot of things. Honourable Deputy Speaker, yes, and she started 20 years back, and I think 20 years back, the Honourable Marais would have, like most of us, had a lot of hope that the ANC will then build this country, unite the country, and walk with the country. Nobody knew that they will just steal and loot and break it down as far as they go. So, to the Honourable Lekker, I want to say, Honourable Deputy Speaker, that Africans can govern. Africans can govern. Nobody will deny that. The ANC cannot govern. That's the problem. The ANC can steal and loot, yes. That they can do damn well as well. Honourable Chair, but you know, I would have been so ashamed if I was in the ANC because we sit currently with a 70% unemployment youth rate. We sit with a 40% unemployment rate. We sit with 13 million people who apply for a 350 rand grant. A 350 rand grant, 13 million people apply for that. This is ridiculous. It's a sin. They should be so ashamed of themselves, Honourable Speaker.
Honourable Minister, if you can just take your seat. Honourable Said, what's your point of order?
Chair, to pose a question to the Honourable Bradell about whether he's in the opposition or in government, but the question relating to...
Honourable Said, that's not a question. Is that a question?
Honourable Speaker.
You may proceed.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, when your national government is as useless as ours, you cannot not argue for more powers to be transferred to local levels. Police, land reform, education and health were debated today. But Honourable Deputy Speaker, what about Eskom, Transnet, Sanral? What about SASSA, the disgraceful SASSA? We must support the poorest of the poor, must support women and children. The ANC is a complete failure, Honourable Speaker, and they sit here with smiles on their faces. They should be ashamed of themselves. Honourable Deputy Speaker, every day we see how money is being stolen by cadres at a national level. Money urgently needed on a provincial and local level. We need new power stations. Instead, we get Brian Molefe and Coco stealing our money at Eskom for themselves and their families. We need trains, but we get a corrupt deal on trains that do not fit our rails. What an embarrassment. We need new roads and harbours, but we get Minister Ntati Mtetwa now wants to build a ridiculous flagpole. What a joke of a national government has become. Speaker, These are but a few examples of our national government
Order, members.
slowly squeezing service delivery and infrastructure development to the death. This ANC national government is not capable of serving and protecting our people. It is only interested in keeping its hands on the money and clinging to power. Speaker, the Western Cape government is making a very strong argument for more direct powers and budgets. Where we are in control, service delivery to the people are simply better. Our safety and police oversight
Order,
performance
members.
support this. Our public and health performance supporters, education supporters,
Finish
land
off,
reform
Minister.
outcomes in the Western Cape supporters, the Auditor General outcome supporters,
Thank you.
the blue drop, the green drop, our water quality
Thank you,
supporters.
Minister.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, that is why the Western Cape government supports this notion that allows the amendment of both national and provincial constitutions that will make provisions for the incremental devolution of further powers
Thank
to the
you.
Western Cape.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, that brings us to the end of this debate. I do note that it has been a long time since we have had so many people in the House. Please may I remind you about the rules and constant interjections. I am trying to allow much more of a free flow of comments, but please note that there are some rules that govern that. Thank you very much, honourable members. We now proceed to interpellations as printed on the question paper. I recognise the Honourable the Minister Allen. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. It will be remiss of me to not highlight within this House that a Daily Maverick expose highlighted the crimes of Colonel Prinsloo. And within Mark Shaw's book, it was stated that that particular crime of selling firearms to criminals here in the Western Cape was potentially the single deadliest crime in post-apartheid time. So we've seen, Deputy Speaker, via parliamentary replies that firearms, illegal firearms that are confiscated here in the Western Cape are then biannually transported all the way to Pretoria, where it is then destroyed. That is a major risk. We have highlighted that risk continuously within this House, and we will continue to do so. In terms of this particular interpellation, I want to thank Member Bosman for raising it, because it speaks to the previous topic as well. Because we would ideally want to see the Western Cape have its own destruction site for illegal firearms so that we can do it on a more regular basis, but also ensure that guns never land up back in Nova Park or in Mitchells Plain and kill many of our people. The deadliest single crime since post-apartheid era, when an officer stole guns and sold it to criminals here in the Western Cape. It was also estimated that around 9,000 guns were stolen and sold to criminals, and I cannot overestimate that particular impact. So, Deputy Speaker, in terms of Section 149 of the Firearms Control Act 60 of 2000, it imposes a compulsory obligation on the state to destroy firearms and ammunition which are forfeited to the state. The obligation to destroy weapons and firearms should clearly remain a state function rather than being, should clearly be a state function. The regulations of the Act require that no firearm may be destroyed without prior written approval of the registrar. And this function currently rests with the South African Police Service. Deputy Speaker, some of the greatest risk in the management of confiscated or stockpiled firearms and ammunition lies in the time between confiscation and destruction and the transportation and movement of firearms from one place to another. We've often heard in this House, in the media, that corruption is not only outside in national departments, it's even within our police service. So the risk of transporting firearms and ammunition to Pretoria, 1,500 kilometers away from where we are, from other provinces, obviously creates those risks. The department is of the view that where possible, the state must destroy confiscated firearms and ammunition within this particular province so that we can not only oversee that, but also ensure that it does not land in Mitchells Plain, in Khayelitsha, and in other areas. So Thank you, Member Bosman, for raising this particular matter. The province also, in terms of its capacity to take on this particular responsibility in terms of Article 9 of the amendment of the SADC protocol, it states that state parties are considered the safest and most economic option for the disposal of confiscated firearms, including burning them publicly or recycling them into non-hostile commercial or peaceful uses. It makes financial sense, Deputy Speaker. It also makes morally sense that it should be confiscated here. Furthermore, the Firearms Control Act regulations determine that firearms must only be destroyed under the regulation by melting, pressing, or in another manner determined by the registrar, so that the original intent, design, and purpose of the firearm or any part thereof is permanently and irrevocably destroyed. As a province, we are obviously still investigating what facilities are available and engaging the South African Police Service, and this function is currently with the South African Police Service.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I now recognise Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Through you, as Mr. Syed would prefer us to do it, I thank the Minister for his response on this critical issue. More than 4 months after raising this issue and requesting that the matter of a dedicated firearm site for the Western Cape be escalated to national level, to the National Department of Police, SAPS have now confirmed in a communique to this Parliament that the transportation of illegal firearms to Pretoria for destruction is not only costly, but it's also done at a high risk. They further admitted that a decentralized process would be less risky and more cost-effective to do. They've outlined that there aren't any risk-free sites in the Western Cape with the melting facilities where these firearms can be destroyed. But in the past, we've had 2 facilities, the Mittal facility in Saldanha. Currently, that's no longer functional due to liquidity issues, and the Cape Town Iron and Steel Works in Kuils River, which is still operational, but it's not recommended owing to safety reasons. Yet, despite being aware of these risks, the national government, through the National Police Commissioner, has shown no initiative to establish a decentralized destruction site in the Western Cape. This, Deputy Speaker, is a slap in the face to the countless families who have lost lives and loved ones through guns provided by SAPS through Colonel Prinsloo. When people get shot in this province, the national talking hat in the form of Minister Cele comes here and has an imbizo. Instead of having imbizos, the minister can put a dedicated destruction site in the Western Cape to ensure that Honourable Barnes' daughter is safe for her future. So through you, Deputy Speaker, can the minister elaborate more on the investigations that are being done to establish a dedicated site in the Western Cape?
Thank you, Honourable Bosman. I now recognise Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the answer. The question I have is as follows. There is a big risk by transporting the weapons twice a year up to Pretoria. I'm thinking about innovation, Minister. When we looked at the court failing us, the department came with the court watching briefs to look at, to up the conviction rate. Do you, as your department, can you do something to make sure that those guns does not come back to the Noel Parks, the Mitchell's Plains? Because I think that is the biggest killer, that it lands up in the wrong hands. So I'm looking at, because I know what Honourable Member is saying, Gillian is saying, but that, it seems to me, is going to take forever. Do you have a plan to monitor, to make sure, I don't know how, but some innovation to see that those guns don't end up in the streets, but get to Pretoria to be destroyed? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Christians. Honourable Kama.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Earlier today, COSATU had to take away a mic from the MEC as he tried to misrepresent this government as that which will work with COSATU, because they have sent many letters to the Premier and he had never responded. Deputy Speaker, as we mark the MEC's 100 days in office, we must quickly point out that violent crimes and mass murderers are increasing. Kidnapping and extortion syndicate is getting out of hand. The CPFs continue to be undermined and underfunded, and our communities don't feel safe. So there is nothing to celebrate in his 100 days. This provincial government is failing on its own safety plan It is failing to address causative factors of crime. It is driving young people to the life of drugs and gangs through the color-conscious poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And yet it wants policing powers to be devolved to the province. What are you doing to address the causative factors of crime, and what are you doing to detect and remove illegal firearms from circulation? We have a serious challenge of circulation of illegal firearms and ammunition in society, and the safety plan has no strategy to address this. The DA clearly has a causal relations with gangs and therefore cannot be trusted with such an important competency. The murder rate in the province and Cape Town in particular increased significantly because of decommissioned firearms that Christian Prinsloo and his cronies sold to gang bosses. It was an apartheid strategy to dump guns in the Cape Flats so that black and colored people kill each other. Prinsloo is clearly an apartheid apologist and a possible supporter of the DA. Around 2015, a Bella DA ward councillor submitted a letter in court appealing for a lighter sentence for a convicted 28 gang member. The Western Cape, as one of the leading provinces with murder rate as a result of gang wars, should preoccupy itself with more strategies to remove these illegal firearms than playing politics and wanting some things that they will never get. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honourable Palmer. I now recognize Honourable August.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Crime in South Africa is completely out of control. Daily we hear the mass murders, mass shootings, robberies, and all sorts of criminal conduct. The number of illegal firearms on the streets is worrisome, more so on the streets of the Western Cape, where the province has seen over 400 shootings between June 2019 and December 2021. If one should tie all this up with the investigative capabilities of the South African Police Service, the situation turns into a dire reality. SAPS has no control over the illegal firearms on our streets and how this further fuels criminal activities. I call on SAPS to consider the possibility of a Western Cape-based firearm destruction site, as this would greatly influence the cost of transporting firearms to Pretoria and lower the risk of safety and security associated with these weapons. As stated last week, SAPS is severely under-resourced, and this is failure for our daily battle against crime. Instead, we should consider ways that can assist national government so expeditiously remove illegal firearms from our streets, and is establishing a Western Cape firearms destruction site proves as one of the solutions. It should be considered. All spheres of government should work together to combat crime and make South Africa a safer country. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognise Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, we all agree that violence is abhorrent, and we all agree that gun violence is especially abhorrent, especially when it is state-sponsored, when it is sponsored by the National Minister of Police in this country, where guns aimed for destruction is actually sold by SAPS members to gangsters. So I fail to understand how the shadow MEC for police oversight in this province can stand up and totally disregard the effects of gun violence in this province at the expense of protecting our national talking hat. I don't understand why Member Kama can stand here and say that it is a Western Cape problem when it's national guns transported by national police, by the national minister. I really need to understand how this is possible.
Honourable Bosman,
that someone who is so...
If you can just take your seat, there is a point of order. Honourable Nkondlu, if your
Chair, can the Honourable Bosman, the chairperson of Community Safety, tell us what is a national gun? Perhaps it's interesting. I've never heard of a national gun.
Honourable members, that's not a point of order. Please continue, Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I should have said national looter. I think they only knows what national looters are. But we do know that these guns are sponsored by Mr. Becky Cele, the national talking head. So when he comes to communities and holds in Bezos and waste taxpayers' money, he's coming here to insult communities instead of providing concrete solutions. So through you, Deputy Speaker, can I please ask our very capable Minister of Police Oversight to educate our Honourable MEC, our shadow MEC for police oversight on the process of disposing guns? can you please, Minister, through the Deputy Speaker, provide a detailed lecture to Honorable Kama on what the actual issue is that we are debating? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I now recognise Honourable the Minister Allen.
Thank you so much.
Honourable members, please, I can't hear Honourable Allen.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. And once again, I am baffled because Member Kama would either agree that the Western Cape government should have a dedicated destruction site for firearms, or he will be fine and happy with it being transported all the way to Pretoria. That is plain for everyone to see, and it is plain for the communities to see, and I wouldn't want to be accused of misrepresenting anyone again. So Member Kama either agrees or he is fine and happy with the transportation, which happens biannually, and I appreciate Member Christian's input. We are a government of innovation. We are a government that are forward thinking under the leadership of Premier Alan Winde. So we will definitely consider. I was even already in my head thinking, how are we going to drive behind that particular van? And we're going to track it. But will I have the privilege just that once we leave the Western Cape, what happens then? So I'm already thinking I would have to track it and maybe take Member Kama with me, so that he can get a first-hand experience in that regard. So thank you for the innovative approach. We will definitely consider how we are able to do it, because there's also inter-provincial transport that will then have to be taken into account. In terms of CPFs, in the first 100 days, I would not want anyone to celebrate with me, because we still know we have a long way to go. We still know that our work is continuing. So when we say that our goal is to have a dedicated destruction site here in the Western Cape, it is one leg also in order to see that the murder rate is reduced. We have an ideal goal that we say the murder rate must be reduced by 50%, but we know one murder is one murder too many. So there's different legs, and the Western Cape Safety Plan speaks directly to those socio-economic circumstances. In front of me is Minister Shana Fernandez, who has a social development component in the safety plan. In front of me is Minister David Menier, and there is an education component in the safety plan.
Order,
we
members.
have other provincial ministers that also have a component in the safety plan, because it is that whole of government approach. And Deputy Speaker, earlier on it was mentioned that no gang member will be afraid of me. I also wouldn't want any gang member to be afraid of me. But what I do know is that gangsters and criminals will be afraid of this Western Cape government that is standing together, and that is doing everything in our power, even going beyond our scope and our mandate in order to ensure that our residents are safer. So they shouldn't be afraid of me, but they should be afraid of this government. We are standing with the residents. We are fighting for SAPS to strengthen the hand of SAPS, and having a dedicated destruction site here in the Western Cape is another leg component, and it's plain to see. It makes sense. It makes financial sense. It makes sense. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Allen. We now move over to interpellation 2. I recognise the Minister, David Menier.
Thank you, and thank you to the honourable member for putting up this very important interpellation on the whole question of mental health challenges. Deputy Speaker, psychosocial support and wellness, of course, has been identified as a priority area for the Western Cape Education Department. The prevalence of mental health challenges is difficult to quantify, but in terms of the support required from our psychosocial support services in districts, the prevalent issues for learners include bereavement counselling, physical or sexual abuse or neglect, mood disorders or behavioural issues, witnesses to traumatic incidents, inappropriate sexual behaviour, substance abuse, and teenage pregnancies. The most prevalent issues which employees are accessing through the Employee Health and Wellness Program are for trauma issues, personal relationships, work-related relationships and conflict, mental health issues such as depressive and anxiety disorders, and of course, family matters. The department has a three-tiered approach to dealing with psychosocial or mental health challenges among learners. First, high-level support is provided by psychologists or social workers in circuits and districts, and this may include individual or group counseling or referrals to other government departments. And of course, moderate level support is provided at a school level in the form of case discussions with school-based support teams or with individual teachers and through referral to community services. And then, of course, lower level or early intervention and prevention and proactive support is provided in the classroom, school or community level, and includes workshops, training, and online psychosocial support. In cases where learners are manifesting symptoms of depression and may even be at risk of possible suicide attempt or just need to talk to someone regarding their mental health, schools should contact the psychologist or social worker allocated to their school by the district support team. But in the case of more urgent needs, schools, parents, and our learners may call the toll-free Safe Schools call center on 0800 45 4647 for assistance in locating immediate support. The department, of course, liaises with Safe Schools to supplement the services from the department employed psychologists and social workers by working with the Department of Health and, of course, the Department of Social Development and many NGOs. Thousands of learners and teachers are reached through our well-being promotion interventions and one-on-one sessions dealing with anxiety, with bereavement, with depression, with abuse, and of course, trauma. Of course, for teachers requiring support, the department has an employee health and wellness program in place for all its employees. The service provides professional support for various issues, including family challenges, financial advice, relationships, medical advice, and of course, work-related challenges. Employees can contact the Employee Health and Wellness toll-free number on 0800 111-011 to have a confidential conversation with one of their counselors who will provide counseling support. The department also has a dedicated website for information for all employees about the program and, of course, the services it offers. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Minister. I recognize Honourable Sayed.
I thank you, the Honourable Deputy Speaker. Let me also thank the Minister, the Honourable Minister, for his response, quite forthright and very, very useful response. We enter these discussions not to score cheap political points, because it's a very, very sensitive matter affecting many learners in our community. We also note on a, I don't know if it's on a lighter note, but that there is a talk that the Honourable Minister may also soon be sitting in the Premier seat at some point, and we do look forward to seeing the dynamics around that. But Chair, I want to commence also by quoting the professor at the Wits University, Linda Richter, who said, and I open quote, "The consequences of mental ill health, even in the short term, are deeply injurious to the individual child and the adolescent, their families and their society. Learning may stop and sometimes even regress, interrupting their cognitive, emotional, and social functioning." I close quote. This is from her forward to the South African Child Gauge 2021 to 2022, which stated that children are vulnerable to a range of mental disorders. These include anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, learning disorders, aggression, substance abuse, psychotic disorders, autism spectrum disorders, and conduct and attention deficit disorders. The Child Gauge confirms that there are reasons to be concerned about mental health and well-being of our youth, especially school-going youth. Now, the effects of gang violence, bullying incidents, poverty that have taken place in our communities and the COVID-19 pandemic have taken a heavy toll on the emotional well-being, on on the emotional well-being of learners, teachers, and parents. Together with organizations such as Equal Education, we as the ANC in this House have been making emphatic calls to the Education Department to strengthen its psychosocial support structures, including ensuring that there is a social worker in every school and a psychologist in every circuit, not one in every district, but in every circuit. Today, we want to ask the Honourable Minister, what has his department done to respond to these specific calls? And what is his department's plan to strengthen psychosocial support structures, including the deployment of social workers and psychologists to schools? The services listed in the department's website in July 2020, including the employer health and wellness services provided by the Metro Health
Finish, Honourable
and by the toll-free number and the psychosocial support for learners to be provided by school social workers, psychologists, counsellors, and social auxiliary workers were all ineffective.
Thank you.
Can we please get a response from the MEC? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Sayed. I now recognise Honourable Bartman.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, firstly, I would like to thank the Minister for the particular response. Mental health challenges affect everyone, no matter where you work, how old or young you may be. And we have seen in COVID that this has been aggravated. Children during COVID couldn't see or play with their friends. And it is crucial that we ensure that there is sufficient mechanisms in the education system so that every child is supported, and in particular, those also with special needs students. We know that the Western Cape always seeks to find ways of doing so, despite the constraints that we find ourselves in. And based on this, I would like to inquire from the Minister whether he's able to provide us with the number of psychologists and social workers that have been employed in our districts within the schools in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Bartman. I now recognise Honourable Kleho.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. The prevalence of mental health challenges in schools is a serious concern both for learners and educators. Bullying in schools amongst learners is one of the triggers contributing to mental health challenges, and in the recent past, we even witnessed some learners committing suicide as a result. This issue is concerning because of often at times it is very difficult to identify learners or educators battling with mental issues until it is too late. In the recent past, we had some educators asking for our assistance against the Education Department for failure to conduct a conducive working environment that is safe. We would like to concentrate on bullying and harassment for so far that they relate or would lead to mental health challenges. We have learners who bully both learners and as well as educators with the backing of an outside criminal gang at times. In our situation, a learner even went to an extent to vandalizing the female teacher's car. The teacher lodged a complaint with both the principal and education department and received no assistance whatsoever. The teacher also went as far as trying to complain with the South African Police Service and also did not receive any kind of assistance as the learner was referred to as being very young. Now, what I want to understand is that in situations where mental health challenges is caused to learners as a result of harassment by the teacher, by teachers or by both learners, what is the department doing in such a situation? And also in a situation where educators are facing serious and enduring serious harassment from learners, what is the department doing to save educators from such kind of circumstances that lead to mental and health challenges? Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And now recognise Honourable August.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Schools are proving to be and become important centers for mental health interventions. Drug-related problems, gangsterism, violence, poverty, and anxiety are common factors of mental health challenges, as pointed out by studies and by the MEC. What we should be aware of is the intervention programs and theory, and as it presented by the MEC, do not always filter down to those most in need of mental health services, counseling, and support. South African communities are stricken with social challenges, and these conditions often make it difficult for children to progress academically in support of working towards tertiary education. Mental health is a multifaceted, and the absence of functional intervention services often diminishes any opportunity children might have to break the cycle of poverty and socioeconomic shortcomings. In turn, the child submits the monstrous behavior they grew up in and were subjected to. Measures of intervention should include the appointment of truancy officers, analyze how NGOs identify mental health cases. EPWP workers play a greater role as a schooling support structure, put systems in place with various community stakeholders, and adopt a family approach in dealing with mental health challenges at school. I would like to ask the MEC how many counsellors are allocated to a school within a schooling district? How often do the counsellors return to the learners to follow up counselling sessions? And how many counsellors are currently employed by the Western Cape Education Department? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognise Honourable Sayed.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. We have been saying as the ANC that to address this challenge, we need an integrated approach between the Departments of Education, Health and Social Development to strengthen psychosocial support and mental health services in our schools. We reiterate our calls for the WCED and the Department of Social Development to form a joint initiative to ensure placement of unemployed social work graduates in schools. This can even take the form of the Western Cape's own version of the presidential employment stimulus. The situation at hand, as revealed by the Child Gauge and Equal Education's recent survey, demands of us to ensure that every school has at least one social worker, I repeat. Given the glaring challenges of psychosocial support and the ineffective intervention measures by the department, I'm not saying that there are no measures taking place, MEC. It is time for a relook of the current measures. Can the MEC at least commit that he will be taking this matter up as one of his department's priorities going into the new financial year? With regards to the partnerships held by NGOs for counsellors, social auxiliary workers and social workers to assist schools during the COVID-19 pandemic, can the MEC tell us how many of these are remaining in place and what was the impact of them? Lastly, Honourable Deputy Speaker, I want to ask our MEC what his plans are to improve the effectiveness of the Safe Schools call centre, which he spoke about. This is the call center that learners call to report incidents of abuse and bullying. It is also used by our educators to report burglaries, vandalism, and other related incidents. And there's been many reports of a slow turnaround time. Spesbona High School that we visited with the Honourable Bartman and Mackenzie and Philander a few months ago was broken into the day after we visited. The Safe Schools call center was very slow in its response, but at least due to the intervention of the committee led by the chair, we were then able to engage them. WCED, by its own admission, said that the call center is mainly used by principals and school staff to report vandalism and burglary, and that reports of abuse and bullying by our learners are too few. Between 2013 and 2015, there were only, Honourable Deputy Speaker, 12 calls received from learners. We also need to address the issue of staff composition of that particular call center. It is unacceptable that there are only 5 trained psychologists serving over 1,500 schools. Can the MEC please tell us what plans are in place to address this particular challenge? I thank you.
Honourable Sayed, I now recognise Honourable Minister Mainir.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Khaled Sayed must be relying on the State Security Agency for his information because, of course, it is completely false. On a serious, more serious note, the Honourable Khalid Sayed, the Honourable Bartman, and the Honourable August. I've been very clear that the psychosocial support is an apex priority of our department. And I think that that is evident in the resources that are provided. The department, as the honourable member probably knows, has 64 circuits. And in each circuit, we have allocated a social worker and a psychologist and have 128 support professionals. We are the only education department in the country to have a social worker for every circuit, with some provinces doing referrals through the Department of Social Development instead. We are also in the process of appointing social auxiliary workers to capacitate the districts, and this, of course, is in the first phase. We've also appointed 160 care and support assistants in our high-risk schools. In other words, schools with a greater need for psychosocial support. The CSAs work closely, of course, with the circuit social workers. And as the honourable member knows, some schools, of course, have their own social workers and counsellors appointed by their school governing bodies. And of course, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the department also works very closely with the Department of Social Development as well as NGOs to provide psychosocial support in schools across the Western Cape. But I will look into the matter raised by the honourable member in relation to the Safe Schools call centre, which I will be briefed on in the next 2 weeks. The Honourable Sego raises a specific case which he is concerned about, and I would be grateful if he would furnish me with the details of the specific case to which he referred so that I can look into the whole matter. In closing, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to remind members once again that psychosocial support and wellness is a priority of our department, which is why we have 280 support staff across the province supporting our learners and staff over and above, of course, those employed directly by our schools. These, Deputy Speaker, are difficult times, and learners and teachers are in distress. And so I'd like to say, if you are in trouble or if you are struggling, please reach out to us, speak to your teacher, or call the Safe School hotline on 0800 45 4647 to get the help you need. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That brings us to the end of interpellations. We now move over to questions as printed on the question paper. Just to remind our members, there are 4 opportunities for follow-up questions, but the honourable member who posed the question gets the first opportunity. So we will now begin. I recognise the Honourable Premier Windy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And also to the Honourable Kama, thank you very much for this actually very important question. And I must say that we are deeply saddened by the tragedy which occurred. You will all know, as members of this House, the Enyobeni tragedy where so many young lives were lost in the Eastern Cape. And as you say, you know, it's a tragedy in the Eastern Cape, but does this, or are we reflecting on it, and what does it mean for us, the youth in our province, and how are we dealing with it? And I want to say, first of all, on behalf of this province, once again, our deepest condolences to those families who lost loved ones. I think we all share in this tragedy together. And when tragedies happen like this, we also have to reflect, we have to think, we have to, are we doing the right thing? And this tragedy really underscores not only underage drinking, but also the way in which I think many traders flagrantly disobey their license conditions. And if any person is witness to this in a Western Cape establishment, they must report it immediately. I mean, this tragedy and this loss of life surely says to those traders, to individuals in this province, if you're aware of this, report it, because otherwise you will have, if we have the same tragedy, blood of those people on your hands. Don't let it go thinking that it's not your problem. It is all of our problem. We have seen this with COVID, that if we all stand together and tackle these issues together, that we can actually find and achieve success together. So I'm calling on all liquor outlets to increase their vigilance. I'm asking parents, I'm asking citizens, please make sure that we do not enable this kind of thing to happen here. If you are the owner or involved in such an establishment, that you do not serve a single drink to anybody who is underage, and put measures in place to ensure that this does not happen in our province. For our part, Deputy Speaker, we are determined to address alcohol abuse and have taken a whole of government approach to this. These interventions must be seen as additional to the role of each individual, which is the person who is consuming too much alcohol or consuming alcohol illegally because they are underage. Parents and society at large in ending alcohol abuse. It's what we call the whole of society approach. Speaker, the Department of Community Safety leads the following. First of all, the Western Cape Liquor Authority. They conduct in themselves education and awareness activities about the harms associated with alcohol abuse. They work with communities, with broader society. These education and awareness activities include messaging about the negative impact of alcohol abuse and the on children and young people specifically, and the importance of reducing availability of or access to such alcohol. The conditions attached to liquor licenses provide for proper control at all outlets to ensure that this is in the best interests of the public, and the public are always protected. The Western Cape Liquor Act 4 of 2008 provides or makes provision for the following specific measures to protect children being minors, and the contravention and failure to comply with these provisions by licensees is an offence. And there's a huge range of them. As you can see, this is a very long answer for this, and I will get it to you. But amongst others, you know, it says no person may sell liquor to a person under the age of 18. No person may give or supply liquor to a person under the age of 18, or allow such person in her or her care, in his or her care, or under his or her supervision to consume liquor. And so it goes on, not allow persons into the venue, make sure you've got adequate signage in place, etc., etc. That's the provincial legislation. There's a whole raft also, in addition to that, in the National Liquor Act, Act 59 of 2003, and that has also a whole raft of areas that outline what would be illegal in a outlet or in a licensed outlet. I can also say that during the last year, the 2021-22 financial year, the Liquor Authority follows through with regulatory interventions, with inspections. So we've had 13,425 inspections in the province, 317 integrated operations in collaboration with SAPS, law enforcement and other agencies, 6 licenses revoked, 107 suspension of licenses, 89 warnings issued to stricter license condition and stricter license conditions imposed, 135 fines to the value of 3.76 million. And so you can see that they've got the wherewithal of investigating. But again, I must say, we can't just systematically follow this through. If anybody is aware, we also need to raise these issues with the authorities so that we effect proper policing. Illegal outlets are just that. They are illegal. So, of course, the legislation and the regulations is all about legal outlets. But we also have a huge issue with illegal outlets, and we need to be policing both. I also want to say that across government, because it's not only the whole of society, it's also the whole of government. So in each department, there are different interventions, for example, in the education department. And it's really good to see how alcohol and also substance abuse is dealt with across grades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And each of them have sort of progressive programs so that in grade 5, you're already dealing with it, but you can see those programs as it moves on, as our learners are moving from one grade to the next, they actually increase the depth of the discussions, the depth of the interactions around substance abuse, the effect of substance abuse, right down to saying how you can actually get help to deal with this from the WCED hotline, right to, as we heard in the previous interpellation, how do we enable it through social workers in our schools? Of course, and that brings us to the social development department. They too have a whole range of activities that they engage with around substance abuse, and also creating that safety net so that we can make sure that when it is picked up, that we can actually help those young people get back on track. Right through to the agricultural department, and looking specifically around the role that they play around alcohol. I think they are very involved in the fetal alcohol syndrome programs. If we think about transport and public works and their safely home programs, and even focusing right down to some of their TikTok and YouTube type programs, focusing on youth. And here they're focusing on youth that are 18 and are actually consuming alcohol, but also making sure that they get home safely, that they are not on our roads, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole range of interventions from radio spots to social media activities. And then in B of the question, the Western Cape government adopted an alcohol harms reduction policy white paper in 2017, which outlines the multi-pronged approach to prioritize the reduction of alcohol-related harms. The implementation strategy for the white paper has been developed, and a transversal alcohol harms reduction task team was then set up. This team then comes forward with policy approaches, looks at legislative changes, looks at issues, for example, like pricing and the economy, unlicensed liquor outlets and the illicit liquor trade, enforcement, alcohol and road environment, health and social services, community-based actions, education and awareness, information, data collection, monitoring and evaluation, and institutional arrangements. And then from there, what happens is we move into policy proposals, and as we have right now, legislation that is actually being amended. Of course, this again is how we test to see if legislation actually helps us make a difference. And this all comes from policy. Of course, here, this is where the Standing Committee and this Parliament can play a very, very strong role in affecting policy, in bringing change to policy, and then, of course, the legislation as well. And then perhaps lastly, a huge opportunity which our team has been working on, and in actual fact, I only got it through yesterday on the alcohol harms team. We have attracted a global conference. It's a global policy conference on alcohol harms next year in October. So that again will be a platform not only for us, but globally, where policymakers come together across the world on alcohol harms. And perhaps that's also an opportunity not only for us to show what we've done thus far, but also for us to learn and for us to find ways in which perhaps learn from others who've already put interventions in place to make a difference, so that we do not have such tragedies as we have experienced in our neighbouring province. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. And I recognize Honourable Palmer.
No, thank you, Deputy Speaker, and let me sincerely welcome that lengthy response. I think this is what happens when you focus on what you need to do than national. But I think, Deputy Speaker, as the Premier has said, that there was in 2017 this white paper which was published on alcohol harms reduction, and we believe it was a step in the right direction. And what we want to check now is how much of government spending has been set aside annually to fund these programs, which are related to alcohol harms reduction, than them being just a set of programs that this particular department, but a more focused program in terms of addressing the alcohol harms. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Premier.
Thank you very much. I don't have the exact number here on budget spent, so we'd have to put that into a different question. But as I said, the white paper set out a comprehensive set of interventions, which I've mentioned. I went through them from pricing to unlicensed liquor outlets, etc. Those have already gone through the first draft. That draft has gone out to consultation. It has come back again. We've already dealt with it a second time with at a cabinet level, made our suggested changes. That's gone again to that multi-party committee that's dealing with it. So it's the white paper that gives the sort of framework to kickstart it. But and of course we'll get the number as the honourable member asks for the budget amount. But in actual fact, that's not the real area where we should be looking at spend. We should be looking at spend on how much is being spent in this environment on both sides of the equation. One is the regulatory environment, the policing, what's being put in place. But of course, there's the other side of the equation, which is not in the budget. It is not, but it's the consequence and the measurement thereof. And now that, I think, is where I think we're starting to see some real traction coming out of our violence prevention tracking system through the Department of Health. So we can now start to ask questions on, you know, gender-based violence or alcohol abuse or drug abuse, etc., because we're picking it up now in the measurement data. And so I think that would be a really good conversation with a standing committee to say, you know, are we asking the right questions? Let's have a look at what we're measuring. And then perhaps there is maybe a shortfall in saying, you know, are we measuring the number of young people entering into the health system because of alcohol abuse and narrowing it right down to even alcohol abuse? Of course, we do know that our Hector system, and we really utilized this tremendously during the pandemic. And national government utilized the data a lot during the pandemic because it's the only province that does measure alcohol abuse in our health system. And if I think back to the presentation that was made on Wednesday at the management committee, you heard Dr. Mudley now saying that Hector system, we really are looking to roll it out at every single health institution that we have across the province, so that we're not only measuring in the 5, which has moved to the 27, but we're measuring them across the province, because then we can also identify substance abuse to gunshots, to knife wounds, to alcohol, and we can even get a subset of alcohol in youth. And I also think that I think coming out of that tragedy in the Eastern Cape, there's another area that we need to focus on. It's something that I know I've kind of had different portfolios in this government over time. And I remember when I was the agricultural minister, I used to call the ale that is manufactured in this province liquid tick, because you don't know what gets put inside that stuff. And I mean, we still don't. It's quite a long time. We've been trying to find out exactly what happened and what was the forensics on the detail of what happened to those young people that passed on. What was the cause? And I'm distressed that we still don't have an answer on that. I mean, we've got global best practice when it comes to detecting viruses and all sorts of things. We need to find out what it is. I've only got a gut feeling from what I've heard, what I've read, that this was a concoction of various ethanols and things, and that's gone wrong. If that's true, I mean, that is murder. That is unacceptable. But we've also got businesses that do this. They find loopholes and they manufacture this stuff, and people are addicted to it. So whether it's an alcohol or a drug, it is the same thing. You get addicted to it. And we need to say then, well, what other regulations do we need to put in place? The consequence of, or the reason why we have liquid tick in our market is because we thought we would write a good piece of legislation and we banned the pupsuck. We said that the pupsuck was causing the problem. Well, the problem was we should have banned the liquid in the pupsuck and not the pupsuck, because that's the container. Because now the container is that 5-liter plastic bottle with the same liquid in it. And that's the problem. It's the product itself, and how do we manage that through legislation? And those are the kind of things that really do worry me. And have we got the right mechanisms in place to deal with this stuff when it ends up in the marketplace and we see the consequences thereof?
Thank you, Premier. Honourable Said.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to the Premier for a well-rounded response. And I think it does take us somewhere indeed. But I just wanted to, and in light of the Premier's positive response, could the Premier possibly tell us that with the benefit of hindsight, and given the tragedy that we are all reflecting on, would the Premier agree that it was perhaps wrong for the former MEC of Education and a department to put forward legislation that now allows for the sale of alcohol at our schools, albeit after school hours and during functions? And will his government reconsider, engage with the new MEC and see how we can reconsider that particular legislation? Thank you.
But I'm not going to do that, because I think the Honourable Said really does not understand the power of schools themselves, governing bodies, and that piece of legislation. I'll only give him one example. One example. In my hometown, we have a festival every year. And this oyster festival creates thousands of jobs. And this festival happens to have a great component of it on a school sports field. And that festival cannot continue if you could not allow...
Order, members.
If you could not allow the school to make the property available as part of their fundraising. Or perhaps it is for a wedding and that school hall is used for a wedding and they use the money for education purposes. I would like to see, I would like the evidence, because of course we change legislation based on evidence and based on impact of what that legislation brought in place.
Honourable Nkondlo, I can't hear.
The Honourable Said to bring me the case of where alcohol is sold on school premises and is licensed in the way that he is saying. I would love to see that evidence. And if he brings me that evidence, then I would contemplate saying, let's talk about a change.
Thank you very much. Honourable Botha and then Honourable Kama. Honourable Botha, no. Over to you. Honourable Kama and then Honourable Said.
No, thank you very much. No, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think in line with what maybe is going to be much more clear, one of the arguments, Premier, through you, Deputy Speaker, so that member side does not call a point of order. No, I'm saying one of the arguments that is made in terms of why young people are encouraged to use or be engaged in alcohol is the issue of accessibility. You know, everywhere they go. I think the Premier made a point here one time about broken homes in these previously disadvantaged areas. And the mere fact that as they open their eyes, they see alcohol in their environment. And now it's the schools. Now, shockingly, it's even at a fuel station. You know, Pick n Pay sells alcohol at a fuel station. So I think the question is that doesn't the Premier think that the government through legislation has a role to play to ensure that we protect other spaces, you know, from being used, whether it's for fundraising, I get that, but that they are associated with the drinking of alcohol, because one young person who's passing that particular school at the evening and people are drinking does not know an issue of fundraising, but knows the school as a place that we can also consume alcohol. So I think that the question is asked in that spirit. Doesn't the Premier think that there are spaces that we need to protect so that as they grow, they know these places to be places of this and not that which is causing much harm in our communities?
Thank you, Premier.
I think the right question would be to ask how many licenses have been issued to an application of a body via a governing body at a school, because remember, it's not the school, it's the event, the wedding, that then says, well, we'd like to serve a glass of champagne at this wedding, and we are now hiring the school hall, and the governing body says, sure, but you must make application, you must make an application for that license. So it would be really a good idea, because, I mean, of course, if the school field was a shebeen on a Friday night, every Friday night, it would be exactly as the Honourable Khama is saying. Young people would be going like, hang on a second, what's going on at my school? But it would be interesting to see if a single license has ever been issued in that ecosystem and environment. And of course, I think the Honourable Member must also understand that, you know, in our society, that there is another way of dealing with it, and that is saying, well, let's just ban it 100%. But I think if the Honourable Member reads history or understands that when it has been tried in the past, the whole prohibition and what happens around illegal manufacture and illicit markets, and exactly what we saw happening when during the lockdown in the pandemic, when it was absolutely banned, the illegal activity was unbelievable, was unbelievable. And so you have to try and find a way to find a happy medium. And of course, that is what regulation is about. That's what policy is about. And of course, I would welcome the ANC's input at this big international policy conference that's coming. They are more than welcome to put input there, ask questions, and find out what happens in other parts of the world when it comes to liquor regulation, and specifically liquor regulation around minors, where it is illegal, absolutely illegal to sell alcohol to minors.
Thanks, Premier. Honourable Sayed, that's the final opportunity. Done. Any further opportunity? No. Thank you. That concludes question 1. We move over to question 2. I recognise the Honourable Minister Maney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for the question, which traverses the whole question of an educator totals in our province. Last month, Honourable Member, I met with stakeholders as part
Please
of
put your phones off, Honourable
the
Members.
annual consultation process according to the provisions of the Employment of Educators Act, and announced that the basket of affordable posts for teachers will be increased by a massive 1,143 posts for 2023. This will allow for the appointment of up to 1,143 additional teachers to the current staff of the education departments in the Western Cape. The details, of course, of the distribution of these posts are, of course, still to be finalized as part of the stakeholder consultation process, which will take place over the next couple of days. Of course, incentives for teaching are regarded as part of the conditions of service of teachers, and the offering of any incentive is a competency afforded to the National Minister of Education as per the Employment of Educators Act. But of course, Honourable Member, we do engage with universities in the Western Cape as to what areas of specialization we require for teachers, because of course around 600 Funza Lushaka bursary holders graduate and seek employment in our province each year. And so we want to assure that we have a solid supply of teachers. In addition, as the honourable member is probably aware, we have a pool of educator assistants who have been making a huge difference in our schools over the past 2 years. And I'm pleased to report that in a survey that we did, our assistants expressed, or many of our assistants expressed their desire to join the teaching profession. These are the kinds of comments which were made by some of our educator assistants. It inspired me to study teaching. It is motivating for me and gives me hope, and I'm hoping that I will get a post when I graduate. Another educator assistant said, it has inspired me to follow my teaching dream because I love working with our kids. The department also, of course, receives, and I'm not sure if the honourable member is aware of this, we receive an allocation of 66 Funza Lushaka bursaries, which are termed community or district-based bursaries, for which we can nominate candidates without having them go through the national process. And we are advocating these posts to our assistants to give them the opportunity to join the teaching profession. And we are currently verifying with our assistants whether they meet the criteria for the bursary, and we will nominate them if they do. Of course, the honourable member should also not forget that attracting candidates to the profession is not where the work ends. I recently visited the Cape Teaching and Leadership Institute, where the training programs include courses for novice teachers entering the system. It's important for us to support teachers right from the start so that we can develop and retain their skills in the system. Because, as I'm sure the honourable member will agree, our teachers, our principals and our staff are our greatest asset here in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Over to you, Honourable questions.
Thank you, Minister, for that comprehensive answer. Of course, I think you also know that we still worried about the educator-learner ratios. That is our biggest concern. And I think a concern is the influx of learners that we get each and every year. So it's a good thing. And I mean, if we have the same learner ratios that we have this year, but we get about approximately 20,000 learners from outside of the province. So will this 1,143 educators, will that reduce the ratios in our classrooms? Just of, doing site visits, in Mitchell's Plain not so long ago, you maybe have a capacity of 1,200 for the school, but now the capacity is now increased to 1,800. And there's no additional teachers to that. So I'm just looking at that because year in and year out, we sit with a problem with the influx of learners. You think you have enough educators and then you don't. And we're still sitting with the ratio teacher difficulty. So Minister, did you take that in consideration, learners coming in, and will that reduce the ratios? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yes, of course, the educator-learner ratio is of concern, especially since we do have an average of about 18,000 additional learners every year. But I'm confident that the increase or the addition of 1,143 teachers next year, which is the biggest increase in many, many years, will go a long way to supporting us to manage teacher-learner ratios and, of course, improve the delivery of quality education in the Western Cape.
Thank you, Minister. Any further follow-ups? Honourable Said.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to Member Christians for the question and to the Minister for the response. The minister mentioned now, and he reiterate the figure, the 1,143 teachers, and I think this must be welcomed, and we'll most certainly monitor the level of deployment, and we'll monitor the manner in which this actually impacts on learning and teaching. But I just wanted to get a sense from the minister, does the minister feel that this is enough? But more importantly, at which particular circuits and districts will these be deployed to? Can the minister maybe give us an idea as to the ratios per circuit and district? Because we know that there are certain districts where it's much needed, like Metro East, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The 1,143 additional posts.
That's it.
Minister, just 1 minute. Honourable Smith, I see you. Can you please mute your camera? Honourable Smith is online. You may proceed, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The increase of 1,143 posts, Honourable Member, is the biggest increase in many years in our province. But of course, if more resources were available, especially more resources from national government, I would have liked to be able to announce that we would have been able to employ even more teachers in our province. As to the distribution of those posts per district or per circuit, as I said in my opening remarks, the distribution of these posts is, of course, still subject to a process, which of course is determined in terms of the annual consultation process.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to the Minister for that response. In the past, there has been certain concerns raised, Deputy Speaker, that the additional teaching in poor and working class communities to take up more learners, and that these often arrive late, these posts arrive late. So they get in touch to say, look, if you're going to have more learners, you're going to get these more posts. The learners come and the posts only come late. Can the MEC assure the House that these teachers will not be used to create more overcrowded classrooms and will instead alleviate the problems? What measures do we have in place? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Deputy Speaker, we obviously, the situation which the honourable member describes is something that obviously our department are eager to avoid, and certainly we will not use these posts to, in his own words, entice schools to become overcrowded. In fact, our objective is exactly the opposite. We want to create additional posts and utilize those posts to manage teacher-learner ratios and to reduce overcrowding in schools in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Christians, over to you. Final opportunity.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Just, Minister, we always have a problem of late placements, and it makes it very difficult, to allocate teachers to schools because of late placement. What assurance do we have that those who apply timelessly will be placed in now it's also, people have three choices, and usually they don't get their first or second choice of preference. They usually get the third one. I've been to a couple of parents that, they get the number 3s and number 1 because they want to have a better education for their children. So just, the assurance that people that apply timelessly will be placed, pupils. And secondly, people that want to, go to other areas. Is there that possibility with the placing of teachers that they will not just be, I'm from Manenberg, so I must apply to the 3 closest schools to me, but I want my child to go to Claremont or to another area. Is there that possibility? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In our province, parents of learners are entitled to apply to any school of their choice, and I would encourage them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now move over to question 3. Over to you, Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And thank you to the honourable member for the question, which deals with our interventions in the foundation phase. As members are aware, and as I may have mentioned in my speech a little bit earlier, last month we announced that our learners in the foundation phase will be spending an extra 2 hours on reading and an extra hour on mathematics each week to reverse very severe learning losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this, of course, will amount to an increase of at least 60 hours per student in these subjects over the remainder of the year, and we hope will go a long way to reversing severe learning losses in the Western Cape. And again, we are pleased that all parties in this House gave support last week to this intervention to get our learners back on track in these crucial subjects. The intervention, of course, will be monitored over the remaining weeks of the school year, and a review report will be produced to inform the next steps that we will take in 2023. But of course, we are building on previous interventions. The following interventions have already been implemented and are in the process of either being implemented or procured to improve mathematics and reading. A synthetic phonics program was rolled out to all English home language schools to improve reading in the province. An Afrikaans and Xhosa home language program was piloted in 2021 and 2022 and will be fully rolled out in 2023 to all schools. An Afrikaans e-learning e-classroom was developed to support teachers in teaching reading through a synthetic phonics approach. Quarterly virtual libraries have been provided to support reading at home, and a procurement process is underway to provide a decodable graded reader to all schools for grade 1 to 3 classrooms. Maths curriculum online is currently being rolled out to about 500 schools in the province. A mental starters maths program is piloted in selected schools with the intention to roll out to all grade 3 classes in 2023. And a procurement process is underway to provide mathematics kits to selected schools in our province. And we hope that these interventions, together with our important intervention to allocate additional time to maths and reading, will go a long way to reversing severe learning losses in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Over to you, Honourable Botman.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the answer. Deputy Speaker, the Western Cape is the only province with these systemic tests, and they are based on these international benchmarks. So I'm really excited that our children will have that extra 2 hours of reading and extra hour of mathematics. Doesn't matter in which form that mathematics come, it's so important for children to be able to count and for children to have the mathematical background in any industry that they end up in the future. And I want to find out, Deputy Speaker, from the Minister, why the department began with the foundation phase first in this particular program, and whether there would be similar strategy for some of the older learners in other phases. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member. As I mentioned earlier, our province is the only foundation phase, which of course should not come as a surprise to honourable members, because that loss of contact time, that loss of teaching time affects our youngest learners most, because of course they tend not to have the maturity or the structure or indeed the self-discipline to cope with rotating timetables and, of course, learning at home. And of course, when we compared the 2019 systemic results with the 2021 systemic results, if you just take one data point, which would be grade 3, we see that there was a 13.8% drop in maths and an 8% drop in languages. And it's precisely for that reason that we thought that we should begin with the foundation phase. As I've mentioned, we will, of course, be reviewing this program, and we will certainly be considering additional interventions for other grades in the 2023 academic year here in the Western Cape.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize Honourable Said.
Thank you very much to the Minister, and my thanks to the Chairperson of our Standing Committee for the useful question. Minister, Deputy Speaker, through you, given the intervention which we welcome on mathematics, doesn't the Minister think that it would be also helpful to make use of some of the existing maths and language tutors to support struggling schools? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
I made the point earlier that we need to do everything we can to support learners in the foundation phase. And I announced a number of measures that had been implemented, and of course, our new intervention allocating more time to proposed by the member. Yes, department in the coming weeks as we consider further interventions here in the Western Cape.
Thank you very much. Any further follow-ups? No. Thank you. That brings us to the end of question 3. We're moving over to question 4. I now recognize the Honourable Minister Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, firstly, thank you to Honourable Mackenzie for the question. The first part of the question, it is difficult to determine an exact date on which a specific license number range will run out, because license numbers are circulated on a daily basis by being issued to vehicles that are being licensed in the City of Cape Town and returning to the system for CA 99999, and subsequently the CAA license mark was promulgated for use in the City of Cape Town. On the 30th of June 2022, the City of Cape Town had over 1.3 million licensed motor vehicles, and although many of those vehicles still have CA license number plates allocated to them, there are thus more than sufficient number plates or numbers available for the foreseeable future. On the 30th of June 2022, Deputy Speaker, PAL had over 85,000 licensed motor vehicles, and there are thus more than sufficient numbers available for the foreseeable future. On the 30th of June 2022, Deputy Speaker, George had 78,000 licensed motor vehicles, and there are thus more than sufficient numbers available for the foreseeable future. The second part of the question, Deputy Speaker, no, there are no other registering authorities that will run out of license numbers in the near future, and the 3 previously mentioned registering authorities are the biggest in the Western Cape. The third part of the question, it's not applicable, Deputy Speaker, and the Department of Transport and Public Works has indicated that sufficient numbers are available for the foreseeable future. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honourable Mackenzie, are you taking a follow-up?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister. I just want to no follow-up from our side, Deputy Speaker. Thank you for the comprehensive response.
Thank you very much. Any further follow-ups? No. Thank you very much. That concludes question 4. We now move over to question 5. I recognize the Honourable Minister Fernandes.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, thank you to the Honourable Kamba Boita for the question. It's a 2-part question. Question A child-headed household is defined as a household in which all members are younger than 18 years. At present, there are currently 28 known child-headed households in the Western Cape. In terms of Section B, the department supports child-headed households by providing funding to specialized NGOs that offer psychosocial support to the children when required, food parcels, the provision of school clothing, support with school fee exemption, and oversight of school attendance. The children are also supported by community-based child and youth care workers or designated family member or community member. Where needed, the children are linked with drop-in centers where they can receive daily food and assistance with schoolwork and any other daily needs. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable Makamba Botia, are you going to take a follow-up?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Minister. Mine is just to check with the Minister in terms of if any child is in that situation, how do they access such support from the social development? She has made mention the fact that they are utilizing certain NGOs to cover that. So I want to know, a child who is in that space, how do they get in touch in terms of getting access to that support? Thank you.
There are various referral pathways. The one is directly through the Department of Social Development at any one of our 46 offices, or any child protection agency like RCFF, PADISA, or Child Welfare. Similarly, it could also be registered at police stations, because SAPs also have a referral pathway, as well as in education, where teachers would identify that a child is in a child-aided household, and the Department of Education would refer that matter directly through to DSD. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Any further follow-up questions? Over to you, Honourable Botha.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to just ask the Minister, are there any child-headed households in the West Coast, and how many are there, if there are any?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you to the Honourable Botha. I do not have that stats available. However, I will ensure that it's the number of child-headed households, and I'll pick up on the second component in Hansard, as I also have an outstanding response regarding 31 children of last week's sitting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honourable Marais, over to you.
Thank you, Minister. Child-headed households is a big problem. Absentee fathers, most of the time. And these children are standing on the streets, they're begging. And that should definitely be something to be addressed. A child is not supposed to work in the first place below the age of 16, but they stand in corners begging for money. That can be construed as a type of job. What do you intend doing about it? Can you and the city come to agreement on how to tackle this problem of child beggars at robots and street corners?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you to the Honourable Marais. It's a new question, but I will answer. Many of the children who beg on street corners are actually not in child-aided households. They have parents. They come. I can give you examples where children might come out of Atlantis and beg at Table View robots, and there are key streets across the city, the metro. These children are sometimes they're begging because they are hungry, but often we find that these are children that are being used criminally, and they are in conflict with the law. So what I have discovered is that the minute I see a child begging, I would necessarily phone and say, can you please check on this? The children, unfortunately, are streetwise. The minute they see a GG, they would relocate from that particular corner to another street corner for 3 or 4 days. So we do have a plan, or we have it. The social workers are there in the regions, and there are children that are known to us. Unfortunately, we cannot just take them off the streets, because there is a process. And if they're not children with behavioral problems or addiction, or they're criminally charged, we can't just place them in a child and youth care center. And this is the crux of the matter. Children run away from home because home is an abusive space. Over the weekend, I spoke to a young boy and I asked him, nou, hoekom gaan jy nie huis toe nie? Hy sê, want my ma en pa is dronk, mevrou, en as ek by die huis kom, gaan hulle vir my slaan. I asked the young boy why he doesn't go to school. And he said to me, his mother's too drunk to prepare his lunch and to assist him with clean school clothes. And out of shame and guilt, he has decided not to go back to school. So that's not a child-headed household. We then attach a social worker to that family, and we look at strengthening the family unit and trying to understand what is happening. In most cases, either the mother or the father is experiencing substance use disorder, and that requires an intervention. And then we need to look at the entire home situation and see whether the children need to be placed in foster care, if they're neglected, and if they're not neglected, we need to provide that family with the necessary psychosocial support to help them get through that. It is unfortunate that post-COVID, we are seeing more children out of school because they don't want the rotation, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday rotation is throw them out. But we are certainly working very closely with education, especially around children who are not in school, who should be in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Honourable Said.
Thank you very much to the Minister. And just following on from the Honourable former Premier's question, and I want to thank the Minister, I think, for the collaboration with the Department of Education. It's a long time coming, but can we just get a sense as to what type of work to investigate exactly the number of child-headed households which were created by COVID-19 in particular? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you to the Honourable Said. That's a difficult question because we would only know once a matter is reported. So we rely on community activists, we rely on members of parliament, we rely on various agencies to alert us. But normally you would pick it up if you saw a child begging. You're quite likely to find that that child is taken to the streets because of poverty at home, or the fact that his or her parent may have relocated, and you see this in town, and the parents might work in the metro, and they're not comfortable with the guardian or the family member they're assigned to. So I can't say definitively that we are actually looking for child-headed households. It is reported through the various referral pathways, and that's how we would be able to assist. But as I said, when it is known to us, I'm certain there are more that are not known to us, and I would rely on every member in this august house to alert us as soon as possible if they become aware of any such situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. That brings us to the end of this question, as well as to the end of questions, as our time is up. Outstanding. I now recognise the Democratic Alliance.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. I wish to use my member statement to place on record my disgust at the current state of affairs at the offices of the South African Social Security Agency in Khayelitsha. In mid-July, SASSA abruptly shuttered its office, which serves as a vital lifeline for thousands of grant recipients. In a week, the office will have been closed for an entire month. For a moment, I would like all of us to put ourselves in the shoes of those thousands of people who cannot access grants, who cannot buy food, who are now told to go to SASSA offices, outlets far away from their area, incurring travel costs which they cannot even afford. How can we allow this situation to stand, to continue? How can we tolerate such categorical failures? SASSA says that it was forced to close its offices due to renovations, but the Provincial Department of Social Development operates out of the same building and has seamlessly moved to alternate premises where they continue to serve the residents of Khayelitsha. This situation did not have to be the disaster it has become, but SASSA has made it this way. They passed the blame onto the city, suddenly demanding that they are supplied with facilities to cover for their own uselessness. In conclusion, Honourable Deputy Speaker, SASSA does not fall within the purview of the Western Cape Government, but Provincial Minister of Social Development, Shana Fernandez, has taken it upon herself to meet with her national counterpart to resolve the situation, because she knows that we cannot allow the situation to continue. The example of the Khayelitsha SASSA office illustrates in the clearest possible terms the difference between two spheres of government. Western Cape Provincial Government, which works tirelessly to help its citizens, and national government, which does not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The African National Congress in the Western Cape would like to applaud the ANC nationally on the policies that were proposed by the delegates who were deployed to the 6th National Policy Conference. In his opening address, the President touched on restoring state-owned enterprises and rebuilding public entities. The Economic Transformation Commission proposed the protection of SOEs and those without a strategic role to contribute to the developmental mandate. Deputy Speaker, the proposals made this past weekend were what the ANC in the province has also envisioned for the economic future of our country. These SOEs will contribute to the economic growth and development of South Africa while alleviating the harsh unemployment conditions currently faced by the country. In support of this, President Cyril Ramaphosa acknowledged in his closing address that the SOEs should be stabilized, restructured, and effectively capacitated to drive inclusive economic growth. In addition, Deputy Speaker, another proposal commendable by these delegates is the proposal for reaffirmation of the necessity of a state bank and the accelerated process of establishing one. The state bank will be a driving force in economic transformation. Our goal is for an inclusive, non-racial, non-sexist country for the people of South Africa, and the current banking sector does not demonstrate that. The introduction of a state bank will prioritize inclusion rather than marginalization. Deputy Speaker, these policies are a clear testimony that the ANC's main objective is to liberate the people of this country while not losing focus in stabilizing the economy with an end of a developed South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member, I now recognize the EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Economic Freedom Fighters welcomes the decision of the Stellenbosch University to expel the student Thiams du Toit. Du Toit was expelled with immediate effect following the recommendation of the university's Central Disciplinary Committee, which found him to have contravened provisions of the university's disciplinary code, as well as residence rules. This follows actions of his racist conduct for entering the room of a fellow black learner and urinating over his belongings. The recent expulsion will go a long way in teaching those with racist mindsets that racism has no place in our society, be it racism with soft gloves to an extent that they often fail to even apply their codes of conduct. Western Cape Education Department should also draw a leaf from this latest development and make sure that all schools have codes of conduct which embody zero tolerance for racism and make sure that the racists are expelled from schools. As EFF, we hope that this is not the end of the matter for Du Toit, as we expect law enforcement officials to also wrap up their investigations and send him to for prosecution. Society should frown and act against racism.
Marked the beginning of women's apartheid regime on 9 August 1956, as well as the countless other women who contributed to building a free and democratic South Africa. Since then, women have progressed significantly in society and assumed important roles in our communities. Despite the fact that much has been accomplished, we indeed still have a long way to go in the protection and advancement of women's rights. Women still live in fear-imposed free society, as seen by the appalling statistics on cases of gender-based violence in the nation. Today, I would like to acknowledge the Western Cape government's ongoing efforts to guarantee the dignity and upliftment of young women against GBV, with the Provincial Social Development Department making significant efforts to guarantee that victims of safety, such as dedicated GBV shelters and Tutuzela centers, as well as offering counseling and mental health services to women in need. The The province is also leading the way in uplifting women with the opportunity to upskill themselves via the Premier's Advancement of Youth project. Over 60% of the 485 young people involved in the project are female. These young women have been offered a once-in-a-lifetime encounter that will equip them with the skills, knowledge, and experience necessary to enter the labour market and build their careers. Additionally, a framework was established by the Western Cape Human Settlements Department last year that enables contractors with a majority of female owners to register for projects during the 2022-23 financial period, expanding the possibilities for women in the construction industry and serving as a role model for young girls across the province. Last year, this time, women made up almost half of the Western Cape's LEAP officers, who are deployed into some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the province. Yesterday, Premier Alan Winde also participated in a foot patrol in Bonteheuwel with some of our women in the blue, together with the Cape Town Metro Police and SAPS colleagues. The DN in this provincial parliament commends the provincial government's commitment towards pursuing gender equality and building a more fair, equitable society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I recognise Good.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Homelessness is becoming a grave challenge both in the city of Cape Town and the municipalities across the Western Cape. I've spoken about this before and will continue to speak out until the government and the Department of Social Development musters the political will to find a workable solution to address the spiraling challenge. About 200,000 South Africans sleep on the street. Of that, about 4,600 in the Greater Cape area, although later research suggests that the number be more than 14,000 and approximately 700 in the CBD. Homeless people are being referred to as unsavory, criminalized, space takers, and often treated with great disgust and subjected to inhumane treatment. Deputy Speaker, I have one question for the people of this province. Is the Western Cape government, and more specifically the Department of Social Development, under the leadership of MEC Fernandez, doing enough for you to find a permanent solution for homelessness? The Cape Town mayor was recently alarmed at the upsurge of homelessness and has called for the city to respond first and foremost in a way as humane beings helping human beings. How hypocritical when the same DA criminalizes homelessness and poverty. There is no separation between government and homeless people. They are citizens in need of your help. Do something about it. I'm calling on a greater cooperation between the province and all local spheres of government for decent, humane shelter, feeding schemes, rehabilitation centres, and proper functional services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Recognise the ACDP.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the ACDP is extremely concerned by the attacks on long-distance buses. On Sunday, 31st of July 2022, an attack on an Intercape bus resulted in the bus driver being admitted to hospital for gunshot wounds he sustained in the attack. This is but one of the series of attacks on long-distance bus drivers. In April this year, a 35-year-old driver, Bankana Makana, died of his wounds after attack on a bus he was driving. He leaves behind his widow and 2 young children. The careless attacks occur while drivers are on duty applying their skill sets to provide for their families. Damage to these buses and intimidation of drivers seems to be the key of these attacks. Buses are attacked by forces intent to stopping them from performing their primary function, and that is namely to transport passengers from one city to the other. It is reported in the Daily Maverick in the 2nd of August 2022 by the Intercape CEO Johan Ferreira that the murder of bus drivers is a part of a campaign of violence against the industry. Intercape has pointed fingers at the taxi industry. Between January 2021 and February 2022, more than so far will lead to further bloodshed. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I recognise the ANC.
Thank you very much. Deliberate flouting of rules of this august House in order to cushion members of the executive from account with no consequences. And municipalities like the DA-run City of Cape Town simply deciding that they are no longer accountable to this legislature through the MEC for local government. This speaks to concerns raised by the Honourable Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in the Zondo Commission report. The latest incident happened earlier this week when the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Education, the Honourable Batman, unilaterally decided to cancel an important meeting to discuss the persistent challenges of unplaced learners across the province on the request of the Education MEC, a meeting which was agreed to as early as June 2022. The sub judice principle was abused to stop this meeting from taking place. Based on our legal advice, which we have sought from 2 senior counsels, there is no basis for using the sub judice rule to block discussions on the 2023 admissions in particular. Moreover, the 2023 admissions is not even the focus of the Equal Education Law Centre's legal action against the Metro East District of the department. They speak about 2022 and its possible impact on 2023. They merely mention 2023. This is a textbook case of subversion of democracy, where committee chairs are used as hired guns in order to protect the provincial government. The scheduled meeting was even removed from the program before the programming authority even met. We have written to the Speaker to ask for his urgent intervention on this subversion of democracy. If the Speaker fails to deal with the matter adequately, we will have no choice but to consider legal action so that the legislature can discuss the learner placements and we can find collective solutions. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Syed. I now recognise the Democratic Alliance.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, am I audible?
I can hear you. You're just going to have to raise your voice a little.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker. As we start Women's Month, we have an opportunity to reflect at the progress being made towards gender inequality and women empowerment, because not much progress is being made. Unfortunately, in a society where crime has reached endemic proportions, this reflection is at risk of being marred by the fact that we have a police service not capacitated enough to deal with the illegal guns on our streets. Illegal guns that are being used to slaughter the women and children in our communities, illegal guns sponsored by our national government. The inability of the South African Police Service to dispose of illegal firearms was revealed by SAPS themselves when they stated that transportation of illegal firearms to Pretoria for destruction is not only costly, but it is also of a high risk. The fact that they also admit that the decentralized process in this regard would be less risky and more cost effective shows that they have no initiative to deal with this issue. While there are many other factors that lead to crime and violence in our community, this admission indicates the SAPS themselves is a stumbling block to the reforms we need to take illegal firearms off the street. Honourable Deputy Speaker, it is time for decentralization of such mandates to be taken seriously so that our attempts to make society safer for residents can truly be realized. If national government does not do this, they will continue to hand illegal firearms straight into the hands of the people who seek to do harm. It's time for action. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Bosman. I don't think that the Hansard would be able to completely decipher that 2-minute statement, and it has, unfortunately, I think, would be to your disadvantage. I would suggest that you send a copy of that statement in to for Hansard printing, please. Honourable members, it is your prerogative to make sure you have a clear, audible sound. We're moving over to the Freedom Front Plus.
Deputy Speaker, the Freedom Front Plus wish to express our thanks to the Programming Committee for giving priority to the debate on the principles, urgency, and desirability of implementing the principle of subsidiarity in the context of efficient and good governance in the Western Cape. I've also noted and appreciate the expected but most enthusiastic support by the DA. And also wish to mention the contribution and support by Honourable Christians of the ACDP and the Honourable Member of August of Good. The call by Member August of Good for a bigger role to be played by Metro Councils in the provision of housing has been noted. The Freedom Front Plus, having been instrumental in bringing about these minority coalitions in the metros of Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, Johannesburg, and Mandela Bay, will certainly explore the possibility of a bigger role of metros in the provision of houses and discuss it with their alliance partners. The dissent by the ANC and its new unofficial alliance partner, Al-Jamaa, is regretted, but not unexpected, as obviously Al-Jamaa is looking for warmth, and this is the only blanket that they can share. However, Article 235 is evidence of the ANC's principled support for self-determination. They signed that agreement with the Freedom Front at Kempton Park negotiations.
Thank you, Member.
To come here and to disagree, they must fight it out with their executive.
Thank you, Member.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, please watch your time. I now recognise Al-Jamaa. Honourable Brinkhaves? No? No. Okay, over to you, to the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the drivers and passengers of long-distance buses have been the targets of over 150 violent crimes since January 21st. These assaults have all involved violent shootings and other forms of violent intimidation. It has been claimed that the ongoing battle over taxi and bus routes, fares, and license issuing is the cause of these tragedies. These assaults have resulted in the death of an innocent driver in April this year. 35-year-old Intercape driver Bangikaya Makanga was fatally shot 3 times, whilst another driver was shot this past weekend. Honourable Deputy Speaker, we as members of Parliament cannot stand by and watch as these tragedies unfold. We need to exert pressure on SAPS and Santaco and the Ministry of Transport and Mobility and the Community Police Oversight on how the provincial government can effectively support and protect long-distance bus drivers and passengers. I want to commend the Western Cape government for leading the charge in the battle against the abuse of long-distance bus drivers and all their companies have to endure. We call on SAPS and crime intelligence and our colleagues in the ANC to urgently speak to the national counterparts to deal with the violence against the national bus drivers and to ensure that the culprits are brought to book. We also call on the justice system to start prosecuting those involved in these criminal actions to ensure justice is seen to be done. I urge the ANC and the opposition benches to engage their counterparts, to come to the party and assist our regional powers to eradicate the scourge of violence in this industry. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. That brings us to the end of statements. In terms of Rule 145.6, I now give the opportunity to one or more members of the Executive to respond to any member's statements for not more than 5 minutes. I recognise you, Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Khaled Syed seems to have tied himself into a political knot. The Honourable Member claims that the matter to which he referred is not sub judice. But I believe he conceded that part of the committee's request is in fact sub judice and agreed that that matter should not be discussed. So it seems that this rule only applies when it suits the Honourable Member. He claims that the 2023 admissions process is not sub judice because the court papers, quote unquote, months ago, he said it's not the focus of the matter. He said that the court papers merely mention the 2023 admissions process. But that, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is just not true. If you look at the papers, in fact, the relief sought by the applicants does traverse the 2023 admissions process. And I quote from the court papers. The relief sought includes, and I quote, a plan on steps that will be taken to ensure that sufficient school places are available for learners at public schools by the commencement of the 2023 academic year. Those are the court papers.
Honourable
Goes on
Minister,
to
if you can just take your seat. Honourable Sayed, what's your point of order?
Honourable Deputy Speaker, is the Honourable Minister able to take a question on the application of sub judice? Can he tell us that whether a committee can actually discuss a matter that's sub judice? He must read the rules.
1 minute. I am not sure that the rules allow you to ask a question under a statement, and I'll tell you what I'll do is, can I refer back to you on this matter? But I will leave it up in this instance to you, Minister, but I'm not sure that that is allowed under this rule. That's the first time I have had to deal with that. Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm responding essentially to a statement made by the honourable member, and if you allow me to continue.
Yes, you may.
The relief sought by the applicant also traverses a plan to assist unplaced learners and late registration learners in the, and I quote, 2023 academic year. So the matter does traverse the 2023 admissions, and it is not true to say that the matter does not focus on the 2023 admissions. So we are constrained by court proceeding. But Deputy Speaker, in the interests of openness and transparency, I have undertaken to provide the committee, subject of course to legal advice, with a written report. And I look forward to briefing the committee as soon as possible under the circumstances when it is appropriate, and briefing the committee regularly so that we can share information about the very challenging issue, which I know is of concern, not just to that honourable member, but also it was raised earlier in the House by Honourable Fernand.
Minister, if you can just take.
So you have to ask yourself. You have to ask yourself.
1 minute. There's a point of order. Honourable Said, I can only take on a point of order.
Chair, there's a point of order, not a question, Chair. Is it within the rules for the honourable minister?
Seems a little bit desperate. Let me conclude by saying that we have to ask ourselves, how is it that this honourable member has tied himself up in a political knot and now finds himself in a cul-de-sac? And Deputy Speaker, I would suggest that the reason is obvious. He has just not done his homework. And so, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to suggest that you seriously consider requiring the honourable member to write out, I must do my homework. I must do my homework. I must do my homework 100 times and hand it to you at the next session of Parliament.
Thank you, Honourable. Thank you, Honourable Minister. That is the end of member statements. I'm not going to take any further points. We're moving over to notices of motion. In terms of I'd just like to inform you in terms of rules, standing rule 150 pertaining to motions without notice, condolence and congratulatory was submitted to the Programming Authority prior to this plenary on the 2nd of August 2022. Members are also reminded that motions without notice pertaining to congratulatory and condolence will not be allowed in the sitting that have not been processed by the Programming Authority. I've been informed that in the Programming Authority meeting of the 2nd of August 2022, political parties did submit the names of the honourable members in the desired order of speaking who had wished to move a motion without notice in the sitting of the House. I'll therefore, just for noting and for the purpose of the minutes, call out the honourable members whose names have been accordingly submitted and approved. The following members' motions have been approved by the Programming Authority. Honourable Lecker, Honourable Barnes, Honourable Maran, Honourable Dugmore, Honourable Sayed, Honourable Kama, and Honourable Christians. I now put the motions duly submitted and approved by the Programming Authority to the House. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The motions will appear in the minutes of the proceedings and in Hansard in each individual member's name as if that member had read them out aloud. I will now forward
the South African Nursing Council to block the proposal for private hospitals to train nurses. This will further add to the strain experienced in our healthcare system, where there are already many shortages being faced. It is important that the public-private partnerships are formed so that we can fully capacitate all of society approach efforts in changing our country for the better. I so move, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognize Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that the House condemn the senseless killing of Hendrik Pistorius, a farmer in Piketberg, notes that the brutal nature of this crime has no place in our society, sends condolences to Mr. Pistorius' family, friends, and the community of Piketberg. I so move.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objection. Agreed to. Honourable Plato.
I want to reconfirm the message earlier from our Chief Whip with regard to that the House welcomes the start of Women's Month, a month in which we celebrate the thousands of brave South African women who resisted and fought against the apartheid regime on 9th August 1956. While those brave women made a remarkable impact on our nation's history, the sad reality is that their contributions have been tainted by the ongoing incidents of gender-based violence in South Africa, such as the heinous gang rape in Krugersdorp, which has shocked the nation. The House must reaffirm, and it's exactly what I'm doing right now, its commitment to eradicating GBV in all its forms. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Clerho.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that the House welcomes to the arrest of 130 illegal minors in Krugersdorp following the rape of 8 women who were shooting a music video at that time. Whilst the EFF welcomes the arrest, we are also concerned about the reactionary culture of the South African Police Service, as they allowed illegal mining to go on for so long and only to act now when the tragedy has occurred. We believe and hope that more can be done, as it is always said that prevention is better than cure. I so move, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed.
Of dam storage levels from around 76% in 2021 to 63.57% in 2022, around this time of the year. This decline is reported to have been caused by the below normal rainfall, amongst other things. We also call on the provincial government and municipalities in the province to attend to water leakages, especially in townships, because it would be useless to call for
Sanitation at 6.5%, high oil and fuel prices, high food prices, and no signs of improvement on our economy. Our people remain poor and cannot afford these increases. Deputy Speaker, the city must just restructure its expenses and embark on cost.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections? The motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognize honourable members. I recognize Honourable Makamba Botia again.
Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Economic Freedom Fighters, I move without notice that the House knows that the month of August is dedicated to women as Women's Month. However, with the current climate of rape culture, gender-based violence, and femicide, it would seem that women are only celebrated through lip service, and reality proves otherwise. My wish is for all women from every corner of the universe to unite and confront the common enemy. Having said that, I would like to take this opportunity to wish all women well in this month of August in the future. I so move, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, it's very close to the motion from Honourable Plato, but I'll leave the table staff to deal with that. Let me just, for the record call, are there any objections to the motion be moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Van Voorgel. No. Moving over to Honourable Lecker.
Deputy Speaker.
Order, members.
Thank you. I move that the House notes with deep sadness the discovery of a body of a woman in a murder and calls on police and government to provide psychosocial support for the grandmother and her children who are traumatized by the discovery of a woman's body in front of their house.
Honourable Sayed.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice on behalf of the African National Congress that the House notes and commends ANC ward councillors of Induli, Kanyiso Yiso and Mr. Andile Gili, who conducted an oversight visit with me to visit Induli Primary School and Linginga Zetu Secondary School in Induli, Ceres on Wednesday, 3rd August 2022. Where we interacted with principals, SMT, and SGB members, and Tulbach, classrooms that are overcrowded, dilapidated infrastructure, including broken fences, and also the neglect of special needs learners, no fences, poor parental involvement, and social ills such as drugs and teenage pregnancies. Notes further that at the high school, there's a shortage of science lab equipment, which adds to poor performance and poor matric pass rate, as 3 learners are forced to share 1 computer due to shortage of computers, and calls on the MEC for Education and the WCED to prioritize the schools for intervention to address these pressing challenges, especially fencing, infrastructure, learner transport challenges, and staff shortage, matters that the WCED has been aware of and is aware of. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion be moved without notice? There are objections. The motion will be printed on the order paper. Last chance, Honourable Bosman, are you here?
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can. You may proceed.
Thank you. Honourable Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that the House celebrates the 190 young people for recently graduating from the Chrysalis Academy. They will now embark on a 12-month period paid career opportunity, and we will be working in several communities in the Western Cape, which further contributes to assisting other young people in need. All in all, these efforts will help our province fight crime and make our communities safer. We thank the management of Chrysalis Academy for the sterling work they do. I so move.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Last chance for Honourable Van Voorgel. Okay, I don't foresee she's here. And just Honourable Karma, I've referred that back to Member Karma. Remember, around the program authority that was not changed. Thank you very much, Honourable members. That concludes the business for the day. Lynn will now end the meeting and all the members will be exited from the sitting. The House is adjourned.